First up, we have the stance on economic development, and that's John Henry's recent poll. Will the city be presenting that, or?
John Henry's out there, he can talk about it. That was the one we asked if you all will allow him to talk to restaurants and such about coming into Bowie Town Center.
Right.
And
is John Henry there?
He's right there. And it was a 3-3 vote.
Oh, there he is.
So John Henry, could you go over that poll you sent out regarding your question?
Let me step everybody back for a moment. One of the advanced items sent out was a copy of a council resolution from 2011, which established an incentive fund. That's the framework under which the city has analyzed and offered some incentives to attract and retain employers. Key thing to note about this fund is it's enacted as a program, but council places no money in it each year, which means that any use of an incentive has to be considered individually. And if council ultimately decides to provide an incentive after the appropriate public process, money from the unappropriated balance is placed into the fund and dispersed for that incentive. Okay, that said, we've never had a conversation about how you would like to use incentives, or even if you want to use incentives. Many businesses are aware that governments offer incentives. Many of the businesses that look at Bowie are aware that we have provided incentives. The incentives we have provided went to Inovalon to retain it. That was $1 million paid to them in $100,000 increments over the course of 10 years. We're about to make the year 3 payment for that. We provided a $50,000 per year for 5-year payment to Berman Enterprises as part of the effort to attract Harris Teeter to anchor the redevelopment of Bowie Marketplace. That was a 5-year payment at $50,000 per year, and the final payment has been made this year. The third incentive we have offered is to FTI Consulting, which is a major consulting company. I would suspect Mayor Adams has encountered them in his other life. They moved their back office here from Annapolis, and we provided them $10,000, and that is being written down over the course of several years. And that's what we've got out there. I was asked by a representative of one of the businesses listed in the council item. I am not at liberty to discuss it publicly, the name of that business or which of the categories it is. But I was asked, would the city consider an incentive? That prompted my outreach to the council via the poll, asking, would you consider an incentive to attract groceries, restaurants, those desirable businesses? If you say yes, the process proceeds with by talking with the representatives and figuring out what it is exactly they need and trying to quantify it. Then when we get it quantified beyond that which I could share with you in the poll, we come back to you in a closed session and give you additional information. And you can decide to keep going with the effort, or you can tell me, nope, sorry, that's just not something we're going to further consider. Let's assume that you say, yes, keep going. We ultimately reach an agreement with the business. That agreement is then brought back briefed to you in closed session for any final negotiations. And then when the document is completed, it is brought to you in public session for public comment, full public hearing, at the end of which you would act to authorize the incentive, and there would be an accompanying appropriation action. So that's kind of where we are. The main thing I need is your guidance in the use of incentives. You can say, yes, proceed, and I'll proceed using the framework of our policy. You can say no. That will hinder our efforts, but we'll continue as we can without that tool. That's all I have at the moment. I'm not ready to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. King. Now, for those who may be listening, we're making reference to R-56-11. That's the resolution of the city of Bowie creating a Bowie Economic Development Incentive Fund. Now, I would ask the council members if they have any comments at this time, their thoughts on the matter. My first thought on this, John Henry, Mr. King, is that I could see with the economic challenges that are going to be facing so many businesses and others, it seems like a good idea to at least go out and to begin to talk to make sure that we don't lose any more businesses within the city at this time. So my general thought is, because we don't automatically allocate any funds to this, that it may be a good use of your time and effort to at least talk to the businesses, kind of define and outline those areas that you think may be of most economic impact to the city, and to begin with them to see what we may want to do with that. And again, emphasizing that at this point, we won't be allocating any funds, just allocating the resources from the city to go out and do the discussions. So having said that, I'd like to go around and just see the input from the various council members, and I'll start with Council Member Estef from District 1.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. John Henry, when we agreed to the Novolon payments, that didn't come out of a specific fund, did it?
It came from the the city's general fund. If I may digress just a bit, the way we figured out the amount of $1 million paid in $100,000 increments over the 10 years is we estimated, based on the taxes we have received from Novolon already, the annual amount of tax revenue we would expect from them if they stay. And we came up with an estimate, and we translated that into, the city was willing to give $100,000 a year for 10 years, essentially giving them back money we have received from them in taxes. It's money we would not have received. That's the same analytical approach we used to attract Harris Teeter. And we looked at the revenue we received each year from average grocery store and figured that we could commit $50,000 per year for 5 years if that meant we'd get Harris Teeter, which would be paying us that tax revenue. So that's where we got the money. And right now, that's my initial look is, if we're offering an incentive, how does it get paid back to us? Where do we make our money back? I don't see us as being in the business of buying in everybody who wants to come. We're in the business of attracting businesses to employ residents and be taxpayers. So I hope that answers your question.
No, it does. I appreciate it. So if we have an economic development fund, so it sounds like we have an economic development fund, we just haven't funded it lately. And when we have offered incentives, they've come out of the general fund?
That's correct. And I think of the Economic Development Fund, everybody likes to see, do we have a fund for the incentives? The approach we took, I think, is the better one. Our fund is really a program and a set of criteria.
Okay.
So that we don't have a pot of money that everyone's coming after. We determine the appropriate amount of incentive to offer for a specific project. So we have a little more control over what's happening in the process.
I prefer
We
that
can just
approach.
easily say to a business, no, we don't have any, we are not able to offer you an incentive.
Yeah, I prefer that approach a lot more on the grounds that when you create an actual fund, then you create sometimes perverse incentives. I think the criteria laid out is solid. There's certain areas that I might like a little bit more defined. For instance, under item C, under fund use criteria, there is private employers that either help reverse or prevent commercial deterioration, that I really like. Private employers that are renovating structures, that I really like. But things like private employers where the retention or attraction of jobs are not likely to happen without the assistance of the fund. I'm guessing that's more or less at the discretion of staff to define what that means, that criteria on a case-by-case basis. Number 7.
The reality is I would assess the particular request initially, and if it, in my mind, meets that criteria, that would advance it to the point where we would bring it back to you and say, here's what the deal is. And you ultimately get to interpret whether or not you want to give money to the specific deal. There's nothing in this process that obligates you to a decision of one kind versus another. So at any point in the process, up to and including the public hearing, you could decide no.
Yeah. This strikes me as a very good tool in our toolbox in general to have, and it sounds like we're using it appropriately, where we're not just having a pile of money sit there to attract people and have everyone claim that they need it, but where this gives us just an additional tool to use on a rare case-by-case basis. I think that approach works, and I'm 100% fine with us approaching whoever it was and having that conversation and getting more facts. I think it's fine, especially if it involves attracting a business that is eluding us otherwise.
All right. Thank you, council member. We'll move on to the council member from District 2, Fort Wolf.
Yeah, good morning, guys. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. I have a little concern about this. The big concern I have is the whole purpose of this is to bring in economic advantage to the city. And I think we need to really consider what the advantage is to the extent that we're giving back money that they would otherwise have given us. And I know that in certain circumstances, for example, the Novolon situation, they provide, that is truly kind of a unique circumstance where they provided, the foot traffic, if you will, for the shopping center that's across the street. I think the dollar amount is too high, and nonetheless, I'm not going to get into the details of that, but yes.
Can you
Excuse
speak?
me.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Could you speak a little louder? It is a little difficult to hear you.
Sure thing. Hold on. Let me try something different here. Hold on.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
All right, can you hear me better now?
Much better.
Okay. I think that the problem with the logic on these sorts of programs is that if your purpose is to provide an economic incentive that worked out for us in our favor, and we're giving back taxes, well, that taxes is what's a benefit to the city. So we've got to be very careful about this, and I'm not sure that we've got this tight enough down, and I think we ought to look at saying, hey, we got to ensure that we get the economic aspect, payback in a meaningful way, and that we're also not giving an incentive to somebody who would otherwise still be coming here or staying here anyway. There's a logical fallacy here, which is if I give back tax money to the people so that they will come and set up shop here, then I've given back the only reason I'd want them here. So So there's got to be something bigger, and that something bigger has got to be meaningful to the city. And I'm not sure that we're really there because, frankly, we don't have a lot of money to be giving away, and it's a little odd and awkward to be, picking and choosing which particular vendor. So if, I heard mentioned earlier the discussion about a restaurant. Well, to me, that's pretty pedestrian, unless that's something that delivering something truly meaningful to the community. And, there are tons of places that would come for that, but they really don't offer much advantage. So I'm a little concerned about having this and making too much use of it. And I think it should be in only the most exceptional cases and not in ordinary business environment. And I'm not here, frankly, to support the endeavors of a given shopping center over another to come, fill their retail space. I do want people to use the retail space, and I want my retail spaces filled. But I'm really quite leery about making any meaningful use of this because, frankly, I think it gets pretty expensive without a lot of show for the go.
Thank you, Councilman. We'll move on now to any comments by Mayor Pro Tem from District 3.
What are we talking about here?
Oh, sorry, we can't hear you too well.
Can't hear
Mayor
you.
Pro Tem.
Okay, can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we
That's
can.
better.
Yep, I said I just got on here, so I'm not sure what the topic is about.
We are talking about the Economic Development Fund that the city has. R-56-11 created the Economic Development Fund in 2011, and we are discussing kind of its criteria, its use, and we are also responding to John Henry King's poll regarding whether we want to authorize him to proceed with a conversation about an anonymous business that has approached us about receiving some sort of economic development assistance. He just needs authorization to have the conversation, and then we'll come back to us in closed session where we can make a decision or get more information. And then obviously, if we choose to move forward, we'll have a public hearing and vote on it.
Mr. King, is this a Class A business?
What was that?
Well, I've got to refer you to the poll because the detail, there is more detail in the poll than I am able to give in a public session.
Right.
I can tell you that it is one of those named businesses.
Okay. Then I am in favor of any incentive to bring them here to the city of Bowie, right? Part of our goal is to continue to increase our economic footprint. So obviously I'm in favor of any incentive that brings them in. Do you know what shopping center they're targeting? Are you able to talk about that?
I'm not able to discuss that in a public session.
No problem. Just know I'm in favor of any incentive.
And council member, I think one of the key points to this is that whatever we decide to do, if there's any conversations, we will come back in closed session and discuss any potentials and make any decisions at that time.
Yeah, no harm in exploring to see what we can get done.
All right, thank you, council member. Moving on to Councilwoman Ndubumadu. I am so sorry, Roxy.
One day.
I apologize.
It's okay.
Moving on to council member from District 4.
I pretty much echo the sentiments of Councilmember Wolfley on this one. I know our topic right now is an incentive fund, but I'm just curious, what other ways have we tried to explore getting economic development to the city without incentives?
The ordinary and standard approach is no incentives are offered. Incentives is a tool you have in your toolkit, and you bring it out at an appropriate moment, often only if it's asked for. I can say that I have declined to use incentives, even though I've been directly asked, when in my judgment, the business does not rise to the level where past councils would consider it of enough value to the city to spend the additional money. That said, the majority of the businesses that come to Bowie will come here without the incentives. There are some, though, that are highly sought after, for whom incentives become the thumb on the scale, if you will, that makes Bowie their location choice. In recent years, very sophisticated businesses will often use the offer of incentives as the tiebreaker when they have found two locations of equal merit to their standards and that meets their needs. The offer of incentives can make that location happen here. I would categorize the incentives we offer to FTI Consulting as being in that category.
Okay, well, I mean, I guess that explains that. I just feel like, for me personally, I know our topic is incentives, so I'm going to drift off a little bit. I just feel like there are other things that we can do, other types of attraction points besides income or demographic or whatever that we can use to attract those more competitive, if you will say, businesses to the city of Bowie. I just think it's a matter of being creative and thinking outside of the box. I mean, Bowie has a lot of things here that the only other place that would offer a lot of the similar things that we have is either College Park, and that's pretty much it, or Washington, D.C. So I just think that there are other things that we need to do to kind of get creative to be able to attract businesses here. I mean, we have an entire university down the street. I mean, most companies are looking for a pipeline. I haven't seen us do anything with that. I haven't seen us either enter into a conversation of how we can, I guess you would say, encourage economic development with the fact that we have an entire university that's fueling pipeline for majority of these companies that are hiring kids out of college. So that's just one example, but I think I know that this is something that we have just in case if it's brought up to be more competitive, to have an advantage. But I think that there are other things that we can do to proactively try to attract the businesses here to boost economic development.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman Ndegomadu. And we will now move on to our council member at large, Ingrid Harrison.
Pardon me for interrupting. Can someone tell me when the council poll was sent and who sent it so I can look at that, please?
Okay, with that, Council Member Dufour?
He was asking about the council poll. When was it sent?
The council poll was sent on August 27th.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Again, Councilwoman Ingrid Harrison.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks, John Henry. And I also agree that incentives should be there, of course, to attract our businesses. Do we model our EDI fund kind of after the county's fund or no? Is ours similar or?
Ours existed before theirs.
Right, okay. Okay, so then they modeled theirs after ours. And also, do we ask the businesses when they come in to employ a percentage of Prince George's or Bowie residents?
We do not.
Okay. Is there a way that we can ask that? Or is that something that would discourage? What do you think? What's your thoughts on that?
Would most likely discourage. We encourage them to connect with Employ Prince George's to fill their workforce, to benefit from assistance in recruiting workers, to benefit from worker training programs, and things of that sort. The reality is many of these businesses have skill sets that require them to go much wider than the city and the county. I'd cite, for example, Inovalon. Part of Inovalon's location choice here is that Bowie allows them to get employees from all over.
Correct, because of the proximity to the 50 and the Beltway. Okay.
We could certainly look at language the county has used in their incentives, and see if there is some language that we can use in Bowie that will achieve what you want as council want without impeding what the business may need.
Right. I mean, I understand what you're saying, and as a former employee of Employ Prince George's, that was definitely something that came up frequently, especially with technology businesses. So I don't know what other types of, or what specifically business that you're talking about now, but as far as restaurants, because I know food service and government are top industries in Prince George's County. So not sure if we can tailor it to the specific business or what, but I still think that there should be something there that says the business should, we should have something, some sort of, not incentive, but something that says that they should look to Bowie and Prince George's County residents specifically for employees. And go ahead.
Certainly language, we can craft that language.
Okay. I don't know. What do my fellow council members think, Mr. Mayor? What are your thoughts on that?
Councilwoman, is that it?
She's asking a question.
She's asking what we
No,
think
that's what I'm
about.
saying. I didn't know if she wanted to continue with anything else while I was on.
Oh, no, I was done. I was just asking your thoughts, but I guess you guys don't have any. So thank you so much, John Henry. Appreciate it.
I'm supportive of the language, Ingrid, for what it's worth. I think that's a great suggestion.
That's it.
Yeah, just to chime in here, I agree with Ingrid on the language piece. I mean, obviously, if we can, she's the expert on Employ Prince George's and getting folks here, but if there's any way we can do that without hindering the incentive package, that's fine. I am curious as to, obviously, I love going after my colleague from District 2. I am curious what he said before I hopped on. Is there any way he's willing to summarize what he just said?
Yeah, I'm sorry, my phone is breaking up there. I do
I
think
can
that.
barely hear you. Please speak up.
All right. Okay, there we go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that it part of the problem we have is that we draw from a big area, so it's tough to tie in an employment, and that makes it, even more kind of difficult to justify spending the money if we can't, tie it in somehow to employees. And I think that we ought to try and find a way to do that because it is, I think, one of the benefits that it brings to the community is that if we can have employers that are here that are hiring employees from our city so that there's less traffic, you don't have to go driving around the Beltway or up a neighboring community to get a job. I think that's a value add, and to Ingrid's point, I think that's a very valid point. I will also say that part of the issue we have is how far along we get and ensuring that we understand up front who we're talking to, so that we're not in a position that we are making some provisional commitments. Because I know that we had an instance before where, as a council member, and I felt that we were, in essence, already obligated based on the level of discussion that we'd already had in closed session to pursue the agreement. And I know that technically we say that you don't make the decision until it's in a public meeting, but ultimately I think that there's so much discussion going on that we don't typically find out soon enough. And I don't think the city should be out there. For example, if you go back and look at the poll, that's not enough information for me to give a green light to engage city staff in an effort to pursue such an incentive when it's as vague as it is. And I think that puts us in a bit of a bind later on in the process. It wastes time and misleads somebody into thinking that we're going to provide something when we might not otherwise do so. But if I look at that poll question, it could be anything. And I think that's why I was a no on it, because, you know, there just wasn't enough information. And it may, in fact, be a lifesaver for the community of Bowie. I don't know. If I'm in a position where I can't make that judgment with the information, then it's got to be a no. I mean, writing blank checks is, you know, even if it's just for discussions, is not adequate. So I think we need to have a method for having discussion about this so people are aware of it up front.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Dufour. And if there's no, to me, what's the benefit to our residents?
Yep.
You know, if we're gonna offer incentives for you to come to Bowie, then what are you gonna do for us? Okay, so yeah, you're gonna sell your products or, you know, your food items, whatever it is, but are you going to hire from the area? Or are you at least going to try to hire from the area? You know, we say we're bringing jobs to Bowie, but is that true? I don't know. So there needs to be something there that makes them, you know, look to our residents and at least and countywide for employees.
Just out of curiosity, Mr. King.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Just out of curiosity, Mr. King, when we did the incentive package for FTI, I'm pretty sure I did recently a tour of their facility over there. They ended up hiring a lot of Bowie residents. Am I correct in that assessment?
I have no data as to where their employees came from, but they look local, they look regional, they look nationally.
Right.
I think it's not uncommon for us to request that they hold a job fair. For the FTI, we did not. But for the Harris Teeter incentive, we did require a local job fair. The idea being that if you hold the job fair locally, you will get a higher turnout from those locally who are seeking work. That's a requirement, or we could consider going forward, certainly.
No, and that's a good option, John Henry. And we did that for Party HQ. And it turned out to be a pretty good, you know, turnout as far as people applying from the city and from the county.
Yeah, I think if we look at it, if we look at crafting as the councilwoman suggested, and I think I hear before, if we look at item 5 and at section D where it talks about different requirements and all, if we could look, John Henry, to craft some of these ideas within that section, that may help us to be able to further identify or see what we would be looking for under section D, where it talks of proof of an executed lease and a specific dollar amount, achievement of maintenance of a specific minimum number of full-time employees at the location, all of those. Within that, if we could craft also about local or some of the things we just talked about, I think that may be able to help us along the way as well.
I think you will, if you were to go back and I'll send you the Inovalon deal, you'll see that before we dispersed the money, they had to provide their lease and all 8 of the addenda to the lease.
And I see that's outlined in item D of section 5. So I think as we've talked about crafting some other language to make that a little stronger, particularly about local, that might be a good place to begin there. Having said that, I don't know if Council Member Gardner is on the line.
No, he's traveling today. He's not able to make it.
Okay, I didn't know from the initials down.
Can I add something?
Yes, recognizing Councilwoman from District 4.
I just want to say I agree with Ingrid as well as Adrian in terms of adding some way of accountability there, because if we are going to leverage the incentive fund, I do think that there needs to be accountability and a way for us to be able to track kind of what we're getting out of this, because I think right now, and correct me if I'm wrong, John Henry, I don't know that there's metrics to track what we're actually getting out of it, in the sense of how many people are being employed, how many lives is this actually affecting here in the city of Bowie? Like, I know you don't have access to their revenue and things like that, but what is this really generating for the city of Bowie? So I think I definitely agree with adding some level or layer of accountability there. And with that verbiage, I think that it will probably do that.
I think you'll see that should we succeed in getting a commitment from a business, one of the things that we do discuss with you in closed session is, as we are crafting the actual offer, you will see many of these things incorporated in that offer. So we're mindful of, we want to be able to account for things there.
That'd be great. And I know from experience that employers aren't that good at getting back to you in regards to who they've hired. So I know that's a very difficult metric to get. But, if we can put some language in there that would, incentivize them or have them provide that information to us, that'd be great.
If you authorize me to go hunting and I bag some game with this, you will see within any document I bring back for your review the safeguards you've talked about, and it'll be at a point in the negotiation where if I missed something, there will be time to introduce it back into the negotiation process.
Great answer, Mr. King. I love it.
And if I can generalize this, what I'm asking for is a hunting license. And if you ever hunted, having the license doesn't mean you're going to hit anything. So if I hit anything, I'm going to bring it back to you as the game inspector to tell me it met the size that I'm allowed to hunt. So there's a lot of things, a lot of checkpoints that have to be met in this process. That does not mean it will always answer everything for everybody, but the intent of the policy was to enable things to happen, but within council's control, so nothing gets rolling and spinning, as Mr. Wolfley said, to where it seemed like it was a foregone conclusion. We don't want it there. It's not a foregone conclusion until the council has voted in public session that that's the deal.
Yeah, I think at this point, the question that I would raise to council is whether or not we want to make sure that we have this additional language crafted and reviewed the resolution again prior to giving out the hunting license, or can John Henry King begin his hunting as he modifies the document?
It sounds like.
You had a question?
Well, all we're doing is giving John Henry authority to talk to somebody. There won't be any commitments. There won't be any anything at all until he comes back to you all.
Right, but my question was, is because some of the council members wanted some additional language put in there, whether or not, I agree, I think he should be given, as I said early on, I believe he should be given a hunting license right now, because everything says it has to come back to us before we can do anything with it, before there's any commitments or anything. So I agree with your city manager there. I was just making sure that the council was comfortable with him going on doing that. before he put any additional language out for them to review. And so that becomes my question. Councilman, Mr. Glenn?
Happy hunting, John, and we can work on the language on the back end.
Right.
All right, council number 2, from District 2, Wolfley.
Yep.
All right, council member from District 3, Mayor Pro Tem.
I wholeheartedly agree with my colleague from District 1. John, have fun hunting, and obviously we can work out agreements on the back end.
Councilwoman, District 4.
Echoing all their thoughts.
I could not hear you.
Echoing all their thoughts.
Okay, and council member Ingrid Harrison, you good with it as well?
I agree, and John Henry, I need you to bring back 10-point buck. Thank you.
All right, so I believe that's unanimous, and so John Henry King, happy hunting.
Thank you all. Have a productive rest of your retreat.
All right, thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is the Black Lives Matter legislation. And I think one of the reasons we're here was to discuss further on how we move forward with that. Councilmember Stebb has stepped out. I think everybody understands and knows the position that I have on this matter. They've seen the ordinance that I put forward, and the purpose of putting forward the Black Lives Matter as an ordinance was simply to codify all those things that our current police department is doing, to codify the things that our city management is doing, and to make sure that we continue to enhance and review those policies to make sure that we continue to do the best practices and those things that will move our city forward. I think with the legislation, the bill that I brought before the council was something that's been through several iterations, particularly with the police department and others. Actually the police union as well, to make sure that I responded to their needs. I think at this point, we need to talk about how it moves forward. One of the things I've said before, and I'll say again, is there is an issue that is not just localized or is a local issue, but it's an issue that we as a nation are facing. And I think because we as the city of Bowie don't necessarily have all the issues that jurisdictions, even right outside of Bowie in the county or in the state or over the nation, don't necessarily have, I don't believe that prohibits or should preclude us from codifying those policies that we're doing that are so effective. I think it's a demonstration not only to the citizens here that we plan to maintain and continue to do in the tradition of the city as we see it now, of making sure that Black Lives Matter, but it also is an example to other jurisdictions and the nation as a whole that you can codify these things. And so that if by some strange way there is an intent to change, that we've codified it and we know exactly what we want from our city, and that it's an example for others. So the one thing that I think that is important, I think that as we move forward as a city, that we put in a minority business plan that includes an MBE for women and minorities. I do believe that we have a citizen oversight, that a citizen should be able to feel that if something has happened and they don't agree with something or have a concern, that they can bring it to other citizens to talk about. We're not talking about giving them investigative powers or anything like that, but just an opportunity to have an incident reviewed by them, by those who will be trained by the police officers, for example, to understand that. But it goes much further than that. It's about making sure that the policies within the city are reviewed on a system-wide basis and updated to make sure that we're continuing to do those things that have the policies that create racial equity, not only in education, housing, but as a city as a whole. And so I would hope that we would look at not just talking about doing them or doing, but actually codify these things. Because that has been the real issue with a lot of things that have happened when it comes to Black Lives Matters and other things, is that we tend not to codify. And sometimes we do things symbolically with great intentions, but they're not codified. They're not a bill of any way that has any real implication on a practical matter other than just sometimes saying we'll do the right thing. With the codifying of it and making it an ordinance, i.e. a bill, it makes sure that we're held to that accountability. And it also shows for those not only now, but coming behind us, that at this time and this place, that we as a city supported Black Lives Matter and equality for all people. And so having said that, I will start off with the council member from District 1, Mike Cassetto.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. I remember 3 years ago now when I signed up for I believe it was the third Citizens Police Academy with the city of Bowie. And I was in a classroom with 30 students, most of them, all of them in fact, Bowie residents. Most of them were local residents, Black women mostly, most of them mothers. And it was that summer during that session that a lot of the high profile police shootings had occurred. And I remember over the course of those several weeks when we were in that class meeting different members of the police department, talking about the day-to-day lives of policing and the reality of public safety in our community, I remember we had some frankly very interesting and very eye-opening conversations. It was a really great program, and I really encourage all of my colleagues, if they're able, participate in future police academies, because those were some really great two-way conversations about some of the realities we face. You know, I want to say overall, the mayor and I had a phone conversation yesterday about this, and I want to repeat it here. I'm a white guy. I don't know what it's like to be followed around in shopping stores because my very presence makes people nervous sometimes. I don't have an intense fear when I get pulled over. I don't like getting pulled over. It doesn't happen often. But I don't have a heightened sense of fear about what could happen in different parts of the community and country if that happens to me. I don't have to live in fear and have that tremendous anxiety in the back of my head, you know, when my kids go out, in part because I don't have kids, but also in part because if I did, they would probably not elicit the kind of attention that sometimes Black and brown kids do when they go out doing nothing in particular. And I certainly don't have to worry, for instance, as it's been widely reported in the news lately, that during an assessment of my house, the property might be appraised at $30,000 to $40,000 less than its actual value, because the person doing the appraising realized that my family was Black. That's a phenomenon. So I want to just start by acknowledging that I think it's more than well documented and more than well established that even with all the progress that's been made in the 250 years our country has existed, there are still a lot of very clear, measurable, disparate impacts facing Black Americans, facing Americans of color. There is still, unfortunately, a lot of discrimination That still needs to be addressed around sex and sexual orientation and gender and ethnicity and religion. These things are still real and they're measurable. So I just want to start by saying that. I think I'm speaking for most of us when I say that we're all committed to the same end goal here, right? And that's we just want to make sure that the city, which overall has done an extremely good job in diversity in hiring, in maintaining best practices around non-discrimination, and a police department that's internationally recognized for maintaining best practices in its policies, for adhering to its CALIA, its accreditation standards, that even though we've done very well, we want to make sure that we continue that work, that we don't just go on automatic pilot here, and that we are proactively thinking about these issues in a meaningful way and taking actions to resolve challenges when we discover them. So that being said, the specific ordinance O-7-20, the initial one that was raised, most of the things in here, I think the spirit of it, we're all on board with. I think the challenge is a couple of things, if you don't mind my taking a second. In section 1B2A, as well as in B1, 2, 3, 5, 6. This really ought to be resolution language and not ordinance language. We change city ordinances when there's a specific law we want to change or a policy that we want to codify. But most of these things are sort of statements of action that don't require an ordinance. And probably make more sense as a resolution or even simply as a straightforward directive to staff. These things, I think, can be included in straightforward resolution language without necessarily having to be done as an ordinance. And so that's just one thing that I want to say. When we start playing around with ordinances, we have to recognize that we're dealing with legal language now. And that's probably something that we would want very careful guidance on, because once we put something in the charter, if circumstances change, then that creates a whole additional layer of steps that we have to take to adjust or improve or amend it down the road. And so I think it might make more sense if most of this is in resolution form. As far as the Citizens Police Review Board, this is already underway. We anticipate that this will be going, I believe, by June or July of next year. So this is already happening. In section 1B1, Black Lives Matter, under Chapter 1B, Human Rights and Dignity, the statement there, frankly, I think needs to be more inclusive, right? Because, we're putting this into our city code. We need to touch on the greater diversity of the community around LGBTQ residents, around religion, around sex, around ethnicity. I think if we're going to put that in the code, it needs to. Under B3, for reviewing city policies and procedures, I might be speaking out of turn, but I believe most of my colleagues are prepared to and want to begin the process of directing staff to recruit a professional firm based on the guidance of Elvita Dixon and the unanimous consent of the Diversity Committee to do a comprehensive review of all city policies and procedures and to give us professional legal guidance on best practices to ensure that we are engaging in non-discrimination in every way, to ensure that we are minimizing disparate outcomes, and to guarantee that our laws and ordinances are up to date with federal and state laws, which have changed in the last 10 years since we conducted our last policy review. So those are my comments on this, and I'm very glad that we're talking about it because this is a serious issue that we have to take seriously.
Well, would you like me to respond, or we'll just go around?
We can go around and then have whatever.
Councilmember DeFore?
DeFore, you might be on mute.
Councilman, District 2, Board Wolfley?
Sorry about that. As Michael pointed out correctly, I was on mute. I apologize. So thank you, Mike. I think that was a good summarization. I agree wholeheartedly with what you were expressing. Secondly, I want to go a step further, which is I want to reinforce what I think is the common understanding, which is we have an exceptional police force, and it is a young police force. That is, they only had it for several years. It's not a legacy force with a history and heritage of problems. So this has been built up in kind of, if you will, in modern day contemporary environment. It's reflective of the community, and it's reflective of our, current cultural norms and expectations. So in looking at this, the original resolution that was proposed, the concern I have is that it specifically addresses the problem that we don't have. And while I certainly agree that there is a broader problem in society associated with justice in its broadest terms, singling out the police force doesn't advance the cause. And it doesn't do anything other than to make the police force feel as if they're being singled out, isolated, or punitive action being taken against them, when in fact that there has been no cause for such concern. So I think to the mayor's point and to Michael's point, there are ongoing issues. We do not live in a perfect society, and it's evolutionary, and it's never fast enough. And we need to continue to advance these issues in this agenda. But I think the initial attempt misses the mark by its narrowness of scope and undermines its overall intent and purpose. So I do think that we ought to be, as Michael was pointing out, pursuing this in a holistic manner. We have infrastructure that the city has had in place for quite a number of years in the form of the diversity committee. There are a lot of people who've spent a lot of time, energy, and effort on this subject, and they ought to be incorporated into this process. And to the point made earlier, there are significant changes in laws at both the state and the federal level that we ought to ensure that we are complying with. And I think that's the best approach for us to pursue this, so that we can ensure that we have what is a good and viable assessment of where we are and what we need to change without necessarily making any short-sighted or too narrow or an adjustment, because I do think there are broader things for us to look at. And for that reason, I think we need to pursue that and look at it as a holistic thing, and remind folks it's not because we think we have a problem. It's because we want to make sure that we don't in the future, and that our rules and processes and procedures are consistent with what I think all of us hold to be the shared values. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. This week has been a tough week for a lot of folks, right, with the Breonna Taylor announcement, especially for people of color and women of color, especially. In the spirit of what we're trying to do here, I think everyone's on the same page, and I agree with Mike on his assessment of the situation. But I also agree with you on your kind of bird's eye view, which is just because we don't have a problem doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to seek the reforms that are important. I do think that the community, after hearing from Chief Neske on the 5th, will be a little bit more clear on where we stand as a department, and we'll be a little bit more clear on some of the initiatives and things that they're going on. And it gives us as members an opportunity to really ask those hard questions in public, for folks to assess it from that standpoint. However, I also do agree with Mike's assessment. I think that most of us here are ready to move forward on the resolution that was introduced last week to ensure that city policies are reviewed accurately by an outside force, an entity. However, I would caution that we wait until the 5th to kind of do, to kind of make any other decisions on what we're doing here, just so we can hear from our police department, right? We may come out of that meeting and say there's more things we need to have addressed, right? We may come out of the meeting and say, hey, actually they're right on track to what we want to see. So that's what I would caution my colleagues, but I agree with Mike's assessment there.
Thank you, Councilmember. Mayor Pro Tem. Moving to Councilmember from District 4, Councilwoman.
I pretty much agree with everyone on everything that you're saying in terms of the statements and the importance of addressing this. I also agree with Mayor Pro Tem in the sense that just because we have a pretty good police department doesn't mean that we don't need to be proactive and continue to address concerns, because at the end of the day, I think what a lot of us are not realizing is we may have a really good police department, but our residents still have concerns. They're still reaching out. They still feel a certain type of way. So clearly there's still something wrong. So I agree with us bringing in an outside firm to really have that kind of professional view on the policies and making sure that we are acting in accordance to the things that we are committing to or committed to. I do agree with many of the languages that the mayor laid out in his original resolution, in the sense of promoting equal housing, education, employment, like our commitments to those things. I'm not completely 100% up to speed on how those things need to be laid out, if it's just a commitment, if it's an ordinance, if it's a directive. I think we can discuss that further, but I definitely do agree to us making sure that we do have a certain set of commitments and we stick to that, so that when this third party firm is coming in, that we have a way to direct them on what it is that we're committed to, so that as they're reviewing policies, they have a certain guideline on what it is that they're looking at. The only thing that I would say that I disagree with is when it comes to Black Lives Matter, I think that there's been a lot of watering of the actual movement and what people are trying to express and achieve by that, in the sense of taking away from the significance and the importance of it. I think a lot of people have gotten into this place where they feel like, well, this person matters and this matters and that matters as well. And I think that what I want to urge most of my colleagues is to think about what Black Lives Matter actually means. I'm not saying that women's equality, gender equality, and all these other things are not important, but what I am saying is they're not encompassed in Black Lives Matter. They're two separate initiatives. So if we want to attack other types of initiatives and other methods for equality, then we need to look at those separately. It has nothing to do with Black Lives Matter. So the only thing that I don't agree with is including in any verbiage that all of those other issues that people do face, like in terms of whether that's ethnicity, whether that's gender, whether that's sex, or whatever that is, I think that those should be very separate. And if we want to take that up, I think that we should absolutely take that up. But I just would like to ask that we leave that verbiage out of it, because Black Lives Matter is about Black lives and Black lives mattering. And that's really what the initiative is about.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Council Member at Large, Ingrid Harrison.
I think Roxy makes a great point in that it is about Black Lives Mattering. I mean, we haven't mattered for so long that now that so many things have come to a head, we definitely need to make what we want come to the forefront. I do agree with that. But I also agree that when we're putting together something for a city that includes more than just African Americans, that we should be inclusive. Definitely making Black Lives Matter a key focal point, but in some ways also be inclusive of other people that feel that they're discriminated against. So I do agree on kind of both points with that, because there are other, I just want to make sure that we're including, we don't want to be divisive or divisive in our efforts with our residents. So I agree also with the resolution to move forward that we shared last week, and concur with Mayor Pro Tem Waffle. That's great to hear from our chief in regards to the police force and bringing in the outside firm as well. And I just wanted to share that I've been sitting in on these community chats for the Bowie Mitchellville master plan. And there was someone who made a comment at the last session about community policing. And she didn't feel that that was happening. She didn't see it. She felt like the only time you saw the police is when you were in trouble. So I talked to Chief Nesky and asked if he could come up with some ideas on how we do that. I know especially with the pandemic, it's difficult, but we can kind of come up with some creative ideas to get our police force out there and show people that they are working community policing, which is definitely a priority for them, but people just don't see it. So I also wanted to ask city manager or city staff, have you heard any comments from residents feeling like they're discriminated against? Has Jesse heard anything as far as people being discriminated against as far as housing or anything like that? Have you heard any of those comments from residents?
I'll chime in on that. No. Oh, no, we haven't. I'd like to, our police forces, this is the fourth one I've worked with. They're really good. Everybody on the planet is represented in our police department. Women are in positions of authority. We are the best community policing organization in the region. And we also are about to be ready to receive our CALIA certification, which adds to all this. Last year, I negotiated a 5-year contract with FOP. That was a tough negotiation. My objectives were to stabilize the police force so we could be able to recruit and maintain people, because in this business, it's really tough to get good police officers, and it's getting tougher with all of the negativity associated with police officers because of the bad guys. And so it stabilized that, and so we ended up with a 5-year rather than a 3-year agreement so that we can sustain and retain our people. I would like to make sure that, I'm neutral with regard to which one of these things goes forward, but I would like to make sure, I like to stipulate that we should not single out our police force. Our police force, if we want to look at everything, fine. Let's not single out the police force and cause people to think there's a problem and none exists here. Not in the region with regard to what the actions and specific actions of the Bowie Police Department. Also, I would like one of the things, man, if we could, before we propose policy that affects the organization and the forms of the organization, I really would like staff to have a chance to look at it before we go forward, so we don't be at odds in a public meeting.
I agree.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Coming back, I think what we've done is we've taken ourselves off of the main road and kind of gone off the guardrails. Because number one, I've spoken with the chief numerous times on this to make sure I address his issues. And the chief has told me I have addressed almost all of those issues that he has with this. And if you read it, you will see that it calls out several times how exemplary our police force is, nor does it single out just our police department. It talks about all the policies of the city. The interesting part is that everybody here is talking about we should continue to do the things we're doing now, because And all this resolution does is codify that. That just puts it into our code as what we will do. Excuse me?
You mean ordinance, right? You said resolution, you meant.
The bill.
Okay.
As we move forward, this bill simply codifies everything you said. When we talk about bringing in an outside firm to review it, we're just codifying that and saying, putting it in there, that we will examine it. And that's a part of bringing it in. When we talk about reviewing all of our city policies and other things, that's in here. That's what it, and all this does is codify what we're currently doing. The purpose of this is to make sure all those great and wonderful things we're doing now become codified. See, what we've done, and I will speak of it from a standpoint of what we've seen historically, is a lot of times we talk about making change, but we do it in a way that's not systemic, that is not codified. And what I'm saying is we have a great police force. We want to review all our policies. Well, let's codify that so that those coming behind us will have the same footprint that we have now and the same pathway we have. That means in the future, it won't just be us who are saying, let's bring somebody in, but we will over time again make sure we keep up with the current law, that we make sure that our police department maintains the current policies that they have and the good standards that they have now. You see, the idea is that we don't need to have symbolic change. We need to have systemic change. And how you accomplish systemic change is by codifying that, by putting that in a bill and making sure that we move forward with it. We all agree that our police are doing a good job, and that's what's in here. And we're just codifying that moving forward. We all talk about we need to have our policies reviewed.
What is the objective?
Excuse me?
I was curious. What is the objective of the ordinance?
To codify.
What?
To codify the way that we do business here. And city manager, would you please not interrupt me like that?
I thought we were having a dialogue, sir. Excuse me.
Could you please just let me finish? We try to go around.
All right.
Okay. And so the purpose of this is to make sure that people understand that Black Lives Matter. Plain and simple. That there's a point right now in our history and in our dignity that we bring out and we talk about what's going on. And when we talk about Black Lives Matter, you see, I believe you can't say all lives matter until you first acknowledge that Black Lives Matter. And I think that we as a city need to make sure that we leave behind and that we codify all the things that we keep talking about. We have a great police force. Let's codify that. Michael, you questioned about the way it's written and all that. The city attorney went through this and said that this is fine the way it's written. We simply want to make sure that as we talk about the great city we have and all the things that we're doing, that we put that in our code, that that's part of our DNA, and that's who we are. I think the city, the chief said it best. The chief said, I understand you, Mayor, because we don't want me and the deputy to get run over by a bus and be gone, and the way we police change. So even though you have police policies, I'm simply saying let's codify those policies and update them as we move forward. And so there's nothing that is opposite of what we're saying, except I'm saying for us to really make it systemic change moving forward. It's to simply codify all those things that we say we're doing and we want to do. It's not to change them, and by no means is this singling out the police department. This is not. I think on that last call we had, and then after that, the chief said, yes, I addressed all of the concerns he had. The one issue that the chief has as a concern is the citizen review board. So when I hear that we're attacking our police department, or we're doing that, I think that's a misnomer and that's untrue, because I, amongst all others, come from a family of police officers. I wouldn't be here today if it were not for them. And my simple point is, number one, Black Lives Matter. That's a big part of what we're stating here. And number two, we want to codify those practices that we're doing now and make sure that we address that there is equality and equity as we move forward as a city.
Yes, I could, Mr. Mayor. So I really appreciate what you're saying. Going line by line through the ordinance, I think we can incorporate just about all this language. I think for me, and I think for a lot of my colleagues, we just want to make sure that we're putting it in the right place to do what it needs in the best way possible. So for instance, in the opening, section 1B1 under the human rights and dignity, so that's something that we could explicitly take, that sentence. And we could actually, and I know we talked to the city attorney about this, and my colleagues have talked about this, we could actually just take this and write the city's first ever human rights ordinance, which codifies non-discrimination in many respects. A lot of communities and towns in the country have done this, have adopted human rights ordinances that codify non-discrimination on the basis of race, sex, ethnicity, and so on. That's something we can do with that section. Under section 1B2, the next portion, section A, where the city acknowledges the exemplary work of the Bowie Police Department, that's not necessarily something that we would necessarily want to do in an ordinance. To recognize the police department or to commend the department, that probably makes more sense as a proclamation rather than an ordinance. We usually don't put a specific congratulations or thanks in legal documents in that particular form, but that can absolutely be done in a proclamation form. The next section, B, and underneath that one, committing to expand just and equal application of the law, examining the benefit of adopting disadvantaged business entity procurement policy, that can absolutely be done simply as a staff directive. We can direct staff today, if we have a majority vote, to start the process of looking at adopting a disadvantaged business entity procurement policy. That one we can literally get accomplished today if we choose. The next sections, 2 and 3, exploring opportunities to adopt policies that promote equal housing, education, employment, so on, and then continuing to review city policies and procedures. That's exactly what our resolution seeks out to do, and we can make that happen in a specific resolution that simply directs staff to do what the group has already talked about, which is hire a professional outside firm to review all of our policies in the areas outlined in Mayor Sections 2 and 3. And we would work with the diversity committee to make that happen and review their findings with the public. We can do that. I don't think there's, I think we're all on board with that. The next section, section 4, appointing a citizens review board. And that section 4, that's a separate resolution or directive that we can give. That's already underway, as I understand it. The police department is doing that citizens review board. And what I would just suggest with section 4 is when the chief comes before us at our, I think it's our next meeting, right? October the 5th, our very next meeting in just a week or so. We can discuss that with him then and see exactly what directive he needs from us to make sure that continues. But as I understand it, that's already happening. Similarly, section 5, ensuring community policing as a standard. That's a policy issue that we can take up with the chief on the 5th and see there may very well be additional language that he thinks is helpful from us to codify that. The next sections, 6, adhering to policies of intervention, also something we can take up on the 5th with the chief. I believe they actually already have policies around that, but if there's additional language or additional directives we could give, we can have that conversation with them then. Same thing with section 7, reviewing and when necessary reforming city policies to ensure appropriate use of force. Also a policy issue. That policy, I believe, already exists, but something we can take up with the chief on the 5th and see if there's any additional work that needs to be done in that way. In other words, literally every word of this ordinance we can incorporate. I just feel that it makes sense for us to incorporate in the sense that's going to be most effective to actually get this done. And as far as the specific ordinance, what I would recommend is taking the opening language underneath 1B, human rights and dignity, and we could actually draft. And I know that I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think our city attorney is pretty enthusiastic about the possibility of us drafting our first ever human rights ordinance, which would codify in all respects policies that we already have when it comes to contracting, but that would codify across the board explicit non-discrimination on the basis of any basis we choose, and I would recommend going with all of them.
Thank you. City Manager, my apologies because you were saying something and I was trying to finish and I didn't come back to you. So if you would like, go ahead, please.
Well, my point I was making about policy being presented before we have a chance to review it. I mean, I know you and the chief had an opportunity to talk because I told him to call you. Because once you had proposed the policy, and it was put on the agenda, we hadn't seen it. And I'm hoping that in the future, that there's going to be a policy that will affect the operation of the organization. That we'll get a chance to review it before it's presented to the public so we can avoid any awkward experiences where staff is at odds with policymakers. So, I really like the idea of a human rights perspective because, 44% of the population in Bowie is of African descent, but 40% more are from Europe, and we have people from Asia and immigrants from all over. So we have a diverse population. So I think I consider myself to be the city manager for everybody. And of course, I've been Black American longer than anybody on this call. So if we can incorporate everybody into it, a policy and a practice, I think we'll be better off. And certainly with the emphasis that's needed on anything related to being Black and discriminated against.
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead.
I'm gonna say if I may. I think we're all kind of trying to accomplish the same thing. I think we all have the same goal, but basically what I'm saying, and I think I'm gonna speak for District 4 and the residents that I've heard from, there's no denying that any council member that's sitting in this room today doesn't represent all communities. Like, there's no denying that. It's evident, it's a fact. I mean, the world is made up of multiple different types of people. That's evident. I think what we're trying to do, I want everybody to remember the context of which this was brought up. The context of this was not brought up for all of human rights. That just was not the context of the conversation. The context of the conversation was for Black lives. That was the context. So if we want to do something for human rights, that's fine. Let's do it, but let it be separate. If we're going to do something for Black lives, because that's the entire point of Black Lives Matter. Like bringing up a resolution, that's 2 resolutions, that says, okay, we're going to support Black lives, and now turning this into human rights is negating that exact very fact. Because the entire point of the movement is to recognize that Black lives matter. That does not mean that any other life doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that any other issue isn't important. It doesn't mean that other people don't face discrimination. That's not the point here. The point is acknowledging the simple fact that Black lives matter and Black people want to feel valued because for years and centuries, they have not felt valued. That is the basic premise of what we're trying to do. So if we want to do something for Black lives and you want to make a commitment, make the commitment to Black lives and then also make the commitment for human rights and encompass it all together. But don't negate Black lives and say we're just going to make this a human rights issue and then we're not going to do what the initial conversation was set out to do because we want to encompass everybody. We are still encompassing everybody, but we also are encompassing a large population of the community that has said time and time again, we don't feel valued. We fear for our kids. We are scared. We are also encompassing their feelings and acknowledging that. And we don't, in this very moment, in this time, given what happened with Breonna Taylor this week and everything that has happened in the last couple of weeks, I personally will not sit here and not speak up and allow anybody to negate the feelings of that subset of that community who feels underrepresented in this moment and turn this into okay, well, let's represent everybody because we have always represented everybody. That's the entire premise. And we will not be able to adequately represent everybody until we represent Black people equally, period, end of discussion. So for me, that's my proposal. If we're gonna do something for Black lives, do something for Black lives and also do something for human rights, but don't try to encompass it in one because it's not.
I think a great point is raised there, if I could. So I agree with Roxy completely, and that's part of the reason why I think the approach of breaking the ordinance apart makes a lot of sense. Because what we can do, because the mayor's initial resolution was very hard-hitting. I mean, starting in 1619 and working our way through, I thought this was beautifully written. I really, 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 really do. And actually, I had Mike Rock, our local historian, add a couple of sections specifically about discrimination that was conducted by Levitt when they refused to sell homes to Black families initially. We added language around that. I think what we can do, to your point, is adopt that very resolution, but have it done in such a way either where it's simply a standalone resolution
Right.
declaring that Black Lives Matter, and we could do that in the form of a proclamation. I think that would probably make more sense. And Alyssa, you can jump in and tell me what you think about that. And we can do that. In addition, we can do the human rights ordinance, which we've already begun discussing, and which I think staff is on board with, and which is very doable, and there's precedent for that in other communities. And we can take every other portion of O-7-20 and get it done. You know what I mean? But just get it done in the right way so that it happens expeditiously and in the right format. I think we can do all that.
If I may, the issue that I'm saying is that you go back and you talk about doing directives, and this is what I want everyone to really understand what I'm trying to say here is, we keep saying that we can give policy or directives to staff. The idea of codifying it is that that directive, that policy will continue on. And we won't, as a council, have to come back every time and say, oh, at this point, let's give a direct staff to do this or direct staff to do that. That it would be codified for us to do that. That would be a part of what we're doing. So many of the things you said, and I think the city attorney would agree, are put in there such that just moves us forward. They're codified. They're not at the whim of anyone, but they're directed. And that's what I'm trying to get us to understand. And I think the councilwoman summed it up best, because this is about Black Lives Matter. I have no problem whatsoever in doing another ordinance or even just a resolution that addresses the overall human rights. But this is truly about Black Lives Matter. And these points are things that are specific to in all of us, but to the Black community in particular. I understand this language and what we're doing here is being done by municipalities and government, not only here in Prince George's County, but in the state and in the nation. And that's the moment we're in. And I believe I heard, was there a question?
Mayor Pro Tem was going to say something.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
No, I think we're still all saying the same thing, honestly. I agree with Mike's route of incorporating language that way. The only thing I want to say is that human rights, Black Lives Matter movement, when Opal and Alicia and Patrice started it, one of the first things they said was that Black Lives Mattering is a part of human rights, right? There are still injustices across the world, and we also have to recognize that. But their goal, and although years later, is really on the policy changes and shifts that we need to make, right? So, although we pass this resolution and it stands as city code, I want us to be cautious about, not cautious, but mindful more so about what policies follow that, right? So we can pass this ordinance. Well, we can't do it today because we're not technically in a meeting, but we can pass this ordinance on
Can
the
you speak
5th.
up a little bit, Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
A little louder, if you can.
Sure. A little louder. I said, we can pass this whenever, but I want us just to be mindful of what the movement stands for and what the goal is, right? We still have to look at policies of our police department. They're still going through this CALEA accreditation process, and we still need to be mindful of what's going on there. But I think we're all saying the same thing. I think Mike's option is actually a good place to be in, where we can reshape and include language holistically. The truth is that even when we pass this, we still have to make sure that we're mindful in reshaping policy moving forward, because things will change over the next couple of years, and so I just wanted us to be mindful of that. So I don't want to take too much time on this, although a extremely important topic. I think we're actually literally all just saying the same thing, and there are matters to be discussed that are at hand as well.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Any other comments? City Attorney, please go ahead.
I don't have any comments. I think you are empowered and authorized to take any of the actions that are before you today. I am, as you noted, very honored to be a part of this effort that the city is making to promote change and to honor the principle that Black Lives Matter. And I stand ready to help you do that in whatever manner you collectively see fit. I don't, as you said, Mayor, I don't think there's a problem with enacting an ordinance, but as I've said to other council members, it certainly can be done by resolution. And if you ask me to sort of give my most candid opinion, I do think that there are things in here that, such as, for example, acknowledging the conduct of the police department, that would traditionally be done, not in this format, but in either a proclamation or resolution, as Mike had pointed out. So I am willing and able to go whatever direction the city council chooses to do, but I wholeheartedly support the sentiment behind what you're doing. And as I say, I'm grateful to be a part of that.
Thank you, City Attorney. Any other council members, any comments at this time? Okay, hearing none at this point. I guess the question comes back to how do we move forward?
So to that, I have a question for Dan or Al or Alyssa. Can we give directives today at this meeting? Or do we need to do it in a public session? So for instance, if I move right now to direct staff to begin examining the benefits of adopting a disadvantaged business equity procurement policy, and we vote on that now, we can do that?
Well, I don't think you want to be making any motions today. We're in a work session, but if we get council consensus, we'll know what you all intend to do.
Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we give you council consensus now on that? But then, because this is going to come back, right? October 5 or wherever, is this already scheduled to come back, or is there no further action being taken yet?
On the either the resolution or what?
Yeah.
Right, if it was contingent on what happened today.
So today is, okay, today's deciding day for next steps. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to move, or I'd like for my colleagues to just say if they don't object to us telling staff right now to begin looking at adopting a disadvantaged business equity procurement policy. If my colleagues so choose to bring this back on October 5 to formally vote on, I'd be fine with that, but I'm very happy to proffer that immediately so that we can get that underway.
So let me say this, we'll start looking at a disadvantaged business policy. We can absolutely do that.
Okay, wonderful. So along those lines, I'd also like to similarly direct staff to begin exploring opportunities to adopt policies around equal housing, education, employment, to continue to review city policies and procedures with a professional firm and with the input of, looking at all the policies of the various departments and with the input of the diversity committee. I'd like us to start looking at firms now and to come back to us at a future meeting with either a list of firms that we can choose from or with staff's recommendation on a firm to go with to do that extensive policy review if there are no objections from my colleagues.
Council member, my concern or my question is, are you removing those so that they don't become codified?
So,
because I would object to us doing it that way.
So it doesn't make sense to use the city code to give these directions. In the same way, it doesn't make sense to use the city code to say we're happy with our police department. It doesn't make sense to use the city code to direct a specific action to, conduct a review. Like when we directed, the creation, or when we directed the review of, city athletic facilities. We didn't do that through the city code. That would have been weird, right? To change the city code to give staff a very straightforward directive. So that's not how the code is intended to be used.
So are you saying that I should change the verbiage in there to say create a minority and women business program?
What I'm saying is that we should probably direct staff to look into how those work and what's the best way of doing
And I
it.
think that's the difference in, I guess, in saying it, is that I am saying we need to create one,
Mr. Mayor.
not just take a look at that.
Al, if I could. So what I think might make the most sense is for us to direct them to start looking into that. And then they can come back to us. And then if they say, yep, it makes sense to create an ordinance to formally create it, and this is how we'll do it now that we know more details, then we can absolutely do that. And I think that'll probably have universal support. But using the code to direct them to get the process started at this stage probably doesn't make the most sense. At this stage, it probably makes sense to just direct it. And then they can come back to us. And if it makes sense to actually establish an ordinance that creates it formally, then we can certainly do that.
City attorney.
Mr. Mayor, I'm kind of chime in
Yes.
just real quick. You know, it's a feasibility issue. And I think that's what Mr. Esther was saying. If you direct in an ordinance for us to create an MBE program, and through the review process, we learned that because of certain litigation or certain court cases that and regarding reverse discrimination, which is a reality out there in this world, it wouldn't be the right thing to do. And then we'd be at an impasse. I think if we looked into it, the first thing we do is to get a legal review from Ms. Levine to determine if that's something that we could determine, because in other places I've been, because of reverse discrimination lawsuits, MBE programs were not more feasible. And so that's just one of the things that we have to look into, which is derail the whole thing.
So in other words, it adds steps to the process, doing this through the code, whereas just directing it, we can cover our bases and actually get it done more expeditiously.
Yeah, we will.
Okay.
Well, and where I've been, I've not seen where there's been a problem with MBE programs.
Right, but
And
they
they're
weren't
established
probably
all over
created
the-
via
the
code.
nation.
They probably weren't created initially via a law change. There was probably initially a directive that created them, is my guess.
Now, we conducted a disparity study in Albany, Georgia, 10 years ago, and in that case, we discovered I think 19 districts where several cities and counties have been successfully sued by organizations referring to reverse discrimination. And of course, but I'm not a legal expert. That's the kind of thing
And that's not to say that wouldn't happen. But for our purposes,
I
we'll
think the
have a
city
lot
attorney
less.
was trying to chime in. Go ahead, city attorney.
So I don't think under current law that there's any problem with a program that allows you to consider the disadvantaged status of the classification of the bidder, as long as you are not then approving a less qualified bidder over a more qualified bidder. So those programs that establish goals rather than quotas, and that make clear that the program is intended to give consideration to that status when all other things are equal, I think you're going to be okay with a program like that. And I think, for example, the county has a very successful program, and while you may not need something as detailed and as intensive as the county's program, certainly it's a place to start when you're looking at what you can and can't do, because obviously theirs is acceptable and successful.
So Alyssa, just for a matter of procedure, does it make more sense for us to just give staff the initial direction to look into that policy now, do the groundwork, and then come back to us? And if need be, we can have an ordinance written? Does it make more sense to do that?
Yeah, I think it does. I think it's the most efficient way to proceed.
Okay. So if there aren't any objections, I would like us to direct staff to begin looking into the process of adopting a disadvantaged business entity procurement policy. If there are no objections, we can give that consent today and get back to us on that.
And so with the other members, what of the Black Lives Matter ordinance do you feel should be codified?
So if there are no objections to moving forward with staff starting the work now of the business entity procurement policy, what I'm going to suggest is that we adopt the resolution 68-20 and that we put that on the agenda to adopt at our next council meeting, and that we simply amend the language, now therefore be it resolved by the Council of the City of Bowie, Maryland, that the City of Bowie, Maryland will engage in a citywide review of all City of Bowie policies and practices. I would like to then add, with the assistance or with the help of an outside professional firm and in cooperation with the City of Bowie Diversity Committee.
And what is that title?
This is R-68-20.
What is it titled?
The resolution of the Council of the City of Bowie, Maryland in the effort of advancing racial equality, or racial equity. And this has all the language for the historical preamble. And we can just amend the last paragraph to adopt, or to direct staff to do the work of identifying those firms that could do an extensive policy review.
I still believe there are points to this that we need to codify.
I disagree, and I'm going to suspect the majority of us think that this can be done better in a different way.
Okay, well, Susan? I will go to Councilman for District 2.
I have nothing further to add.
All right.
I think I support Michael's position on this.
Going to Councilman District 3, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yep, same position as my colleague from District.
All right. Councilwoman from District 4.
Mr. Mayor, if you can explain just briefly what kind of like the deeper opposition between kind of like Michael's direction?
Well, what I'm saying is that there are certain things that are policies within the city that I think we need to codify, that need to be put in the code that we've referred to, that are no longer just policies, but a part of the code. For example, and again, I don't want to seem like we're going out, but to examine the policies of the city, for example, to make sure that that promote equal housing, education, employment opportunity, improve the health and well-being of all persons in the city. I think that that's something that should be codified, should be part of our code as to what we do, and not just something that we do one time. When we talk about, because on that point, we're talking about having, for example, a firm go out and look at all the policies and all. But my point is that should be codified. That should continue to be a part of the city code and not just one direction. And then 10 years from now, it still not be something that's done again. I believe that continuing to review the policies across the department with input from a diverse part of the community, including not limited to law enforcement, I think we should have our community and others looking at the policies of the police department, and that should be codified. That shouldn't be something that's just done by direction, but I think as a city, we should codify that. I think we should codify having a citizens review board. I think that's important. I think there are many citizens who have talked to me that would like to know if they have a place to go besides just the police department, they have a concern. And that being putting it where a citizens review board can take a look at it. I think that should be done. And ensuring that police officers continue to adhere to their duty to intervene, which really touches right on Black Lives Matter. That's something we currently do. And to ask that that be codified.
So,
I was going to ask you, Mike, that's actually a question really quick. I'm looking at both resolutions. I think in the terms, I'll come to the Citizens Review Board in a second. In the terms of under section B on number 2, is there a way that we can add that in the sense of to make it a general practice so that when that kind of third party person comes in, that they have set guidelines, like, hey, this is what we're going
that's exactly correct. So what you're exactly right. So what the private firm would do is it would do 2 and 3.
Right.
So they would professionally, legally look at our documents, and they would focus on policies promoting equal housing, education, employment opportunities, health and well-being, but they actually go further. So Alvita Dixon, if you want to, I can put you in touch. The diversity committee has worked on this before and is familiar with this work. And there's a thorough legal review that is done
Right.
to ensure that our policies meet all those best practices. So that's what the private firm would do in items 2 and 3, is ensure that those are happening.
But can we add that to the resolution as our commitment in the sense of so that they know?
I'm happy to take the language exactly as written from 2 and including that in the resolution.
Okay. Cool.
Absolutely.
Cool.
I can certainly do that. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, because for me, it's just more so about us having that set so that people know that that is the commitment, and then, you know, the firm can come in and kind of do something different. I want to ask a quick question. I know Chief Nesky is not here today. Maybe for Mike and Adrian, on the Citizens Review Board, I spoke to Chief Nesky yesterday, but just from your kind of perspective, where is that lying? Like, is that kind of what, because Adrian, you mentioned that he's coming to present on the 5th. Is that included in the conversation?
It's also one of his objectives.
Okay.
His objectives for this year, to get that accomplished.
Is that already documented somewhere?
In the city budget.
I mean.
It's in the budget.
Right,
It's in the city budget.
In the budget also,
Yeah,
which is a directive from you all, to us,
right.
the budget.
Okay, cool. Is there a way that, when I spoke to Chief Nesky yesterday, I don't have the budget in front of me, so I don't remember. Do you remember what the timeline is on that, at the Citizens Review Board? Was there a timeline?
This coming June
The
or
deadline,
July.
that was the deadline to have it established?
Right.
So what it is they have to go through an extensive legal process to
Right,
get
I
it
know
done.
that's where he is.
But they're on track right now to do it. And so they're supposed to start getting that underway in June or July. Probably. They're going through the legal steps now to make that happen.
Okay, is there a way that we can add in your verbiage, since Chief Nesky is already doing this is already underway, our commitment to supporting him in that process and just in sense of the city of Bowie or the council?
Sure. What I would recommend on October 5, because again, this is an ordinance. So this is
Right.
changing city code.
Got it.
And one of the things that Nesky has brought up many times now is that we have to be careful when we play around with the code when it comes to police policies, because their policies are updated based on the national CLIA standards.
Okay,
And so his advice to us was essentially, look, you know, we can talk policy one-on-one, and there are specific ways in which we can give specific guidance on policy, but we just have to be careful not to put it into code, because that can create legal problems for the department down the road. That they have to be able to update their policies consistently based on CLIA standards. So what I would recommend on that is let's talk to him on October 5 and see
Okay.
what directive he needs from us on that.
okay. In terms of the CALIA standards, because I don't.
Correct. And that would be items 4, 5, 6, and 7, including the Citizens Police Review Board. And those are things we can discuss with him on October 5, get detailed answers from him, and see if he needs any guidance or directives from us on that.
Okay, I'm good with waiting to hear from him.
So if that's the case, then I've suggested, if there's no objection, that we move forward, we bring back resolution R-68-20 at our next council meeting, and we simply amend the directive language, now therefore be it resolved, that the council of the city of Bowie, Maryland, will engage in a citywide review of all policies and practices through, and we can get the exact language written down, but through the use of a private firm or a professional firm. We will include language from section 2 to explore opportunities to adopt policies that promote equal housing, education, employment opportunities, improve health and well-being of all persons in the city, and continue to review policies and procedures across the city's various departments with the input of the diversity committee and report the findings to the community and seeking feedback. I move, or I would like for us to
What
bring,
resolution number are you looking at?
oh, I'm so sorry, R-68-20.
68-20. Do we have that in here?
It should be.
It's there.
Yeah. So it's your ordinance, just with the directive at the end, as I've stated, plus the language from Michael Roth on the store discrimination by Levitt.
And where are we on, Mike, just for your resolution,
Thank you.
where are you on item under B, number 1, where it's examining the benefit of adopting a disadvantaged business entity procurement policy?
If there's no objections, we've given staff to start that process now.
Got it.
Yeah. So if there's no objection, then I suggest we bring R-68-20 back with the changes proposed. That would encapsulate under B, items 2 and 3, if there's no objection.
Because where I'm at is I'd like to hear from Chief Nesky on the 5th, because I spoke to him briefly, but only for 30 minutes, it wasn't long, just so after we speak to him to understand, I personally don't understand CALEA, don't really get that, so I need to learn more about that. After we speak to him on the 5th, if there are any things that we need to do and bring forth another ordinance on that issue, then we can do it then after hearing from him on the 5th. And there's a better understanding for me on CALEA. So I'm fine doing that. But if we do this today, I can't say that I'm confident in knowing and understanding how that may affect our police force and their standards going down the line in the years to come. Not saying in a bad way or a good way. I just don't know enough about that topic.
If I might state, CALEA is a national accreditation standard, so it is a national best practices. And so there are many standards that our police department is working toward to adjust their policies, how they operate to meet this national standard. And then it is reviewed by accreditors who evaluate as to whether or not our police department has met those national standards that have been vetted. So much like you have an accredited university or another professional accreditation.
Is it a legal obligation, like they have to meet that accreditation?
No, it's a completely voluntary scenario.
Gotcha, okay.
So what we're doing is we're saying that our police department, we want to hold our police department to a higher standard, a national standard of best practices. And that's what our police department has been undergoing over the past few years to reach that standard. And so we're in the final stages of getting into where we're getting reviewed and then hopefully ultimately approved. So we will be an accredited agency within CALEA system.
So then what is so then if CALEA is more voluntary than anything, I guess I'm saying, so let me ask you, Tim, since that we know that's voluntary and it's in the budget and we've directed them to appoint a citizens review board, are we just simply restating it?
You're restating it, yes.
Okay.
Or the city is already in that mode and moving in that direction to achieve that. So it would be a restatement.
See, but there's nothing, and that goes back to my whole thing again.
In the sense of making
We're not codifying anything. You know, symbolic change does not equate to or equal to systemic change.
The police review board is not symbolic change. It's in our budget. The police review board is not a symbolic change. It's in our budget and it's happening. It's already happening.
Yeah, but is it codified? Because that means the city council could dismiss it. That's my point. Is that not correct, Mike?
What I would suggest is that on October 5, we talk to the chief and see what makes the most sense.
But that's my point, is how do these things...
If I may, pardon me, I'm sorry, I can't, my mute was off here for a second. If I may interject, any of this can be changed by anybody at any point in time.
Right.
Just as we are doing so currently, whether it's codified or not. It is putting it in code doesn't make it permanent and mortal. It just means that until such time as somebody takes them to issue again, it's in the same manner as a policy. We look at our policies that we have, for example, on our development and acquisition or what do we call it, annexation stuff. It's all in place until somebody changes it.
I understand what you're saying, council member, but that would be for every law in America, that it could be changed. That's that. But my point to it is this, and I understand the majority of my colleagues may be moving in a different direction. But my point again is that I believe that the most important thing we can do is to codify these things. And again, I understand the nature that some of you see it, but I feel very strongly about Black Lives Matter, and that we have a significant portion of our residents who want to know that they're being recognized, and that in this time, that we strongly point out and show that Black Lives Matter. And one of the things that has been on the national trend, and I know we talked about our conversation yesterday, council member, but I feel very strongly that though Bowie may not have all the problems that other areas have, we're not any different than anyone else. We're a city within Prince George's County, within the state, and what I mean by that is we have a great city here. A lot of places don't. We have a lot of positive things going on here. A lot of cities don't. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't reach out and that we shouldn't address the current issues, nor does it mean that we shouldn't try to codify. Now, we can move forward, and I think we're at a point where I think the majority of our council are to be able to move forward with doing something a little differently. But my point is that, you know, we also, I feel, have an obligation to make sure that we address the systemic issues that are going on. I understand all about the training and all of that, but I don't see where, just being very candid, saying that we need to codify that our police force make sure that they restrain and continue to do what they're currently doing in their policy. In talking to the chief, we're making sure that there isn't an abuse of their power. That they do intervene when another officer is doing those things. I don't see anything wrong with us as a city codifying that. But I take it that my colleagues disagree. And so I accept the council's choice to move, but I feel very strongly that, you know, you can't say all lives matter until you're first willing to openly and honestly say Black Lives Matter first.
Agreed, and resolution -68-20, which we're bringing up, enshrines our unanimous statement that Black Lives Matter, and further directs that we will be hiring a private firm to ensure that all of our policies reflect that and ensure best practices around non-discrimination in all fields. We will also be bringing items 4, 5, 6, and 7, which deal with the police department back at our October 5 meeting. We'll be able to discuss this at length with the chief, and if any further directives need to be given, we can give them at that meeting or a future one, but otherwise the Citizens Review Board is already in our budget, already underway. The only other remaining item was the Human Rights Ordinance, which, if there is no objection, I would like to direct staff to begin work on a Human Rights Ordinance. We'll work as a group proposing language. I think, Alyssa, we've already spoken about this.
Mike, is that separate from this?
They're totally separate.
Okay, got it.
So this would be a separate, so this is Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
And hiring a firm to ensure non-discrimination policies and best practices.
Got
With language from sections 2 and 3, which we can, plus the diversity committee, the changes I proposed.
Okay.
But a separate human rights ordinance would enshrine non-discrimination in all respects: race, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, sex, national origin, which is important. As Al pointed out, we have a lot of immigrant groups here from all over the world, ethnicity and so on. And we can get an ordinance that mirrors ordinances that have been established in other cities across the country. And I think we can get that done in a fairly straightforward manner. Does that make sense, Alyssa?
That's fine, I can do that.
Perfect. So I think those are the 3 items that take care of all the language in O-7-20.
Okay. Getting kind of late. I'll get to the other stuff.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear
You're
you.
kind of late if you want to get to all the other things on the agenda.
Adrian, did you have something?
So who will put together
Can I
this
add
that we can review? Go ahead. Say
So
your name.
I'm sorry, there is an existing document that all contractors have to sign when they submit their proposals for any bid or other award of a contract that demonstrates their commitment to non-discrimination on all of those bases. So just so you know, so I can send that to you all so you have it, just so you know what all of our contractors do in fact commit to doing. What I'm proposing is to maybe use that as a basis of sort of taking that and sticking in the code with whatever changes or modifications you collectively want to make. But it is a pretty broad, comprehensive non-discrimination statement on all of those grounds. And I'm not sure how many of you realize that it was in fact part of our procurement package as it is.
So we already have language related to contracting, and we can simply expand that and make it into a human rights ordinance.
Yeah.
That'll save us some work. Okay, thank you, Alyssa.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks, Alyssa. And sorry, you guys, I was on mute the entire time.
Were you saying something, Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, no, I was just saying that I was on mute, but agree with Alyssa on that direction moving forward.
Okay, I'm hearing no concerns with that. I think staff has direction on which way to move with it. And we will be revisiting this on the 5th, is that correct?
R-68-20 with the changes that we discussed today.
So we will be revisiting that on the 5th.
And
Okay,
the chief of police will
Will be present as well, and we can address items 4, 5, 6, and 7 within that.
And we're going to take these other actions and try to formulate what we can do. I mean, some of the, the MBE issue, we may not have the expertise, but we may have to hire somebody to help us write that. Also, I'll be talking with Alyssa about the human rights issue ordinance and taking a look at what she's got, because we may need some assistance writing that too.
But everything is underway then. Okay.
all right, any other comments on this from anyone?
I do have one little question just to be clarified. So Michael, for your suggestion on the resolution R-6820, do you want to wait first to have Chief Neske do his presentation, and then maybe if there are more changes that need to be done, then bring this resolution up for adoption at our October 21st meeting?
So resolution.
Just so that we don't have to amend it again if there are any changes?
As clarification, resolution 68-20 will simply be directing the hiring of a private firm to review all city policies. So that will not involve, does that make sense?
It's not really.
Okay, because I heard comments about the police chief doing his presentation and things like that.
We will discuss with the chief separately. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a little lost now. What just happened?
I think we are clear in regards to the direction for what's being brought forward at the next meeting in regards to what Councilman said is relayed in the expectations. So we'll have a clean meeting for everybody.
Because on the 5th, we need to put it in, and then we can always look at it on the 28th.
It's going to be a resolution which will be considered for adoption that evening.
Yeah. So we'll be good with that evening.
So it won't be on the consent agenda, then debated publicly?
It would be on a consent agenda unless somebody wants to have it for.
And then for the 28th, we'll actually have the debate.
No, that would be an ordinance.
No, so a resolution we can vote on that night. We don't have to have any delay with the resolution.
Yeah, but I thought we were still having some parts over. Are we saying nothing's going to be codified?
On the 28th, the resolution will be directing the hiring of a firm to review all city policies. As we discussed, it will also be stating Black Lives Matter, so that will be on the record, right? That's something we're all behind. And then separately, the human rights ordinance, we are directing staff today to begin working on. And that's something that they will come back to us.
So we're saying we're taking out all portions of B on 720, for example, and we're not going to address any of those to be codified.
We are taking every part of 720 and putting it where it needs to go to get it done.
But none of it being codified.
Much of it may very well be codified, but we have to do a lot of legwork to make sure that it gets done correctly.
Hey, Mike, I have a question. On your resolution, are you changing you see where it says now there be it resolved? Are you changing that verbiage?
Yep, as I said 3 times today. Yes, and staff gets it.
So what, I understand what you're saying, so I sense your frustration. So maybe if you want me to come back to this question, I'm happy to, because I'm.
So resolution 68-20, we are changing the language, now therefore be it resolved, and including the language, as you suggested, which I read items 2 and 3.
Right, so that's what I'm asking. You're not changing it in terms of like taking it out and putting something completely different.
No, we are changing it and putting in 2 and
you're just adding, so you're changing it to add.
Correct.
That's what I'm asking. Thank you.
Sorry, changing it to add.
Yeah.
Okay, any other comments? Anyone? If not, let's move on to item 3, City Council rules of procedure. Any comments, questions, any particular area that anyone have concerns about?
Yes, I don't have, I need to have that, I got a Wilda, did you resend, or somebody resend that out? Was it attached to an email? Because I couldn't find it.
Mr. Mears put it out on Teams as part of the document for this meeting, so it's out there in the files for it.
Okay. Yes, if from memory, I just need to get some clarification around the change from mayor to chairman.
Oh, remove
If
those.
you could address that.
Could I ask Mr. Mayor, do you mind if staff just gives a quick background on this? Or whoever suggested this be on the agenda today, just give us a quick update on what we wanted to accomplish with this, just so we're clear.
I actually could address that. And that's actually really just outlining as we were going through this, that we have a good set of working rules on how we conduct the meetings so that we can be efficient, effective, and that we don't look as if we're digressing in any way, shape, or form, or being disrespectful to each other and all those kind of things. It lays out what we can and should and how we should do things. Who changed from mayor to chairman, I think is what.
Yeah, this is an ongoing issue in terms of if we could just get and I apologize that I don't have access.
I'm sorry, before, I think that's you, but we can't hear you.
I'm sorry. I'll speak up. Thank you. Part of the issue has been trying to get a original clean set of language and then trying to figure out what the proposed changes are and kind of who's proposing them and why. And I think it's gotten, it's all gotten conflated, and it's been difficult to ascertain exactly what it is that we're trying to achieve.
I agree with your assessment, Dufour, because I don't understand what the changes mean and why we're changing it. And of course, we are guided by Robert's rules as well. So I'm just not understanding what needs to be changed and why.
Yeah, Dan, did you ever send out the track changes? I think I don't remember seeing them, but maybe that would be helpful for I think my colleagues.
He did.
Having this stuff. Okay. Could you guys? And this doesn't have to be today. Maybe we can postpone this discussion just for the sake of timing and other topics that need to be discussed. But if we can bump that up, because it seems like other members don't have that handy right now, that would be really helpful to evaluate moving forward, but defer to the mayor on this topic.
What, council member, I didn't understand what you were just saying.
He was just asking for the changes basically to be sent out, like in terms of Dan to resend the email, and then he defers to you on the topic. That's what he said.
I would say, I would add to that, not just the changes, but the original clean as well as the marked up version.
Okay, so everybody got the original, but what you're saying is you want to see how the
He wants
original was.
both, the original and the end.
Okay, because that was sent out to everyone.
Well, what I had asked for in our meeting was the side by side or something that shows, the original markup, so I can see both, and I think that's what was sent out.
Yes,
I
that
have
is
the
what was
email
sent
and
out.
I'm gonna send it. Oh, are you sending it, Wilda? I was just gonna forward it.
That'd be great, because I couldn't find it in Teams.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Mayor, can I ask, so who proposed these actual changes? Where do these proposed changes come from?
I made a proposal.
Mayor did.
Okay.
It wasn't us.
Huh?
I was just saying.
Gotcha, the proposed, so all the proposed changes came from you?
Oh, you're talking about the
Yeah, all the red in the document, all the new stuff, all the changes.
I'm not sure if that all came from me. if each of those lines was.
So there was a black line copy that got added to the agenda, and I don't know where that came from, but I took, Will had given me the original, and we did a compared version. So what you're seeing there, what was sent out with all the red lines in it, is just a comparative two-word versions together. So
where's the new version?
Will, where did you get that original
So
from?
the original one was adopted by council back in 2000.
I'm sorry, not the original version, but the modified version that just came up in, was it June, early July?
That was, I believe, council member Ndebumalo that brought it up at that meeting.
I don't remember where I got it from, so that answers that.
Yeah.
I believe you said you had gotten it from our county council chair, Todd Turner.
Yeah, that was originally done.
Oh, so Roxy, you brought, sorry, Councilmember
Okay,
Ndebumalo, so you
no.
brought this up. This was suggested by Todd Turner.
What was suggested? I'm not sure I understand. And why would Todd Turner
This was
suggest?
after we were having all those issues, and I'll leave it at that, but I'm going back over them. And it was to assist with the decorum and making sure everyone understood how we should conduct ourselves.
Understood.
Okay,
And
so,
we'll leave it at that. So I think what we should do is send out the original and then take a look at it. And then we'll just have to come back to this. But it's obvious we aren't in a position to discuss this right now. Is that correct?
Well,
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I agree as well, but I do have a question. So why was it changed in the first place? What were the primary issues?
Well, because it was when speaking with, I think that's a good question. In speaking with the city attorney and others and looking at the city charter and all, it's the council should decide how they will conduct their meetings and how they will move forward. And so how we want to do it, what I mean by that is, it says in there that we will determine our meetings, we'll do Robert's rule, but we also were trying to get some, for lack of a better way to put it, rules of engagement, and just reminding us of to be, I'm not sure that anyone had read that old resolution on how we conduct the meetings.
So does it not state that we should be courteous or, I mean, I'm not sure. And are you suggesting that there be some sort of repercussions if someone speaks out of turn? I guess I just need to get an understanding of why it needs to be changed or what changes.
I think what it is it reminds us of how the meeting should be conducted, that's all. And I think this lays out how we conduct it, how we do our motions and do those things. Just think of it as bringing this up to date, the agenda and everything else, that all of us have the same document to refer to on how we're conducting business, that's all.
Okay.
So, Mr. Mayor, were you suggesting that we table this for now and resend it and come back to?
Yeah, just resend it. It's obvious we're not in a position to discuss it at this point.
Sounds good.
So we just send it back out. Some people want to see the original, and we'll do that. And then we'll move forward because we still got a lot of items on the agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I hope I'm not being too difficult. Could I ask for a 5-minute break for us to use the restroom and get food?
No, I'm just kidding.
3-minute break.
Let's take a 5-minute break, please.
oh, wow, there's a lot more to go.
Yeah. All right. I'm sorry for getting testy.
Oh, you're
I
fine.
apologize. That was inappropriate.
You are
I'm very
so
sorry for
fine.
that. We're doing great. We're doing great.
speak. Super. All right, we're all set. We're back off mute.
Yeah, great. We'll be coming back from our brief recess and continuing on our city council retreat work session. It is now 11:39. All right, the next item on the agenda is discussing and putting forward to the city staff in particular, our council priorities. I think there are a couple of things we probably would like to discuss, and I have two that I'd like to put out that are broad enough, I think, that the city manager and staff would feel able to address as we move forward. So number one is, I would like to see what we can do to make sure that we move forward in trying to help our residents through the pandemic. And that will entail some things, city manager, and looking at what we might be able to do as a city to continue to encourage and help with those who may be in need of food. And also in making sure that some of those who may need some assistance, not necessarily with PPE overall, but with masks as well. What we can do to assist that, to make sure that we can continue to try and keep the numbers down for COVID. So those are two very broad ones, and I'd like to go around to the different council members to get some input, and we can just kind of dialogue through this. And
Sorry about that, Mr. Chairman.
that's okay. I'll start with Council woman Ingrid Harrison. If she could, if she has some priorities she'd like to share for us to dialogue on.
Well, I'd certainly like to have kind of an ongoing dialogue, but one priority I certainly want us to look at is workforce development. And not just for adults, but for youth, making sure that, we are looking at, everything, including economic development. And as I stated earlier, bringing in opportunity and jobs for our young people and, of course, our another part we need to look at, and I'm trying to think specifically how to incorporate, but looking at our senior population and recognizing that Bowie is made up heavily of seniors, and many people that I know that I've talked to when I was out there campaigning lived in Bowie all their lives, and they want to stay here and not leave the city. So we have an aging in place population, and look at our senior facilities. I know Councilmember Boafo and I talked to the owners of the management company for the 3 senior facilities and looked at those needs and what they need. And that certainly needs to be ongoing discussion to ensure they're taken care of. So those are 2, of course, ones right off the top of my head that I'd like for us to consider as a priority.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, Council member. If we could now go to Council Member Estes in District 1.
To the extent we're able to focus on beautification efforts in the city, combating litter, looking at rights of way where we may be able to improve existing kind of public art that we have. I'm thinking in particular that Bowie sign on Route 197. We got to do something with that. Yeah, that's
in our budget for this year.
Perfect. I think a lot of this is stuff that we're probably already doing. We may just need to revisit. Code compliance we've been addressing, so I'm happy with that. I would like us, and this is a contradiction to everything we're discussing right now, but and we're going to discuss in a little bit. I do want us to work very strategically with the county and with the tax differentials we've gotten to be very careful with our tax rate. And we're going to talk about that more, but I am extremely concerned about what our tax rate is going to do to residents and businesses in the community. I want us to work with the county on our tax and regulatory environment as it deals with businesses in particular. That's a complaint we hear all the time from businesses, that the tax and regulatory environment in this area is extremely challenging for them. And then last but not least, I would like us to continue to work through our master plan, which we're also going to discuss, to focus on smart growth policies and preserving existing low density as low density. And we'll discuss that in a little bit. But otherwise, those are my main things.
And Mike, can we add also to the master plan piece, of course, environmental concerns, ensuring that we're taking care of that as well?
Definitely.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you, Councilwoman.
Environmental concerns adding to the master plan.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
just adding.
And I apologize, I missed one. One of the biggest things that I'm working on right now, which we have to do in conjunction with the county and the state, is road improvements, sidewalk improvements, pedestrian crossing improvements. We're talking a lot about expanding roads in many places like 197. I actually think there's some parts of the city where the data suggests it may make sense to slow down certain roads. And long-term even take, like, for instance, 450 and turn it into a true main street and not a road, which is a huge change. But that's something that I think we're going to have to face in the near future.
And I think along with that goes the crossing section.
I'll make a note of these and look, try to turn them into actions. For example, Councilman Harrison's first comment, workforce development. So council will provide for and promote workforce development within the city. That would be the action for provide support for the council to the senior population would be the other way to put that in action. And then the third one, as Harrison mentioned, was preserve the environment in the city of Bowie. That would be one of the priorities of, and then combating litter, encouraging public art, working with the county on taxation and rates, and encouraging pedestrian movement.
And also, yeah, just a general road and sidewalk improvements broadly, which is a ongoing challenge.
Infrastructure, road and.
Thank you.
Got it.
Thank you, Al.
Now, Adrian, you said is on his.
He's on his way, yeah, we can, yeah.
Okay, why don't we skip over, anything you'd like to add, Councilwoman?
Yeah, I think they mentioned some of mine, but for sure workforce development with Mike on infrastructure and road improvements, in the sense of just not saying that we aren't proactive, but ensuring that there's a certain level of proactivity there, but we can kind of discuss that in detail, what that actually looks like today anyways. Environmental sustainability as it pertains to the city of Bowie, as well as developers and things like that. And then I think my major one is smart cities development. I know our IT committee has been working on smart cities a lot. So seeing which way smart cities can actually enhance city services and which ways that we can actually attain some grants focused on smart cities for us to be able to enhance city services and help our public works department, as well as constituent services things for the city. So, yeah, those are my.
That's good. Okay.
All right, here,
Councilman.
go to number 2, Councilman Tour.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to echo, of course, some of the things that my colleagues have already mentioned, but I want to start off with just a reminder. I think, the biggest thing for us is core services, and, particularly as we're facing fiscal constraints and even the impacts of pandemic and the like, that our very existence, the main purpose is our core services, and ensuring that we maintain those as the number one top priority, I think is important. I think everything else is icing on the cake. Other thing are, big in the community, traffic continues to be a big issue. And certainly in my district, whether it's traffic at the macro level associated with roads that really are beyond our control, such as Route 3, 301, to the ones that are under our direct control, which are city streets, those things are a fair amount of importance to our constituents, and things particularly on the local streets that we can affect changes on. To Ingrid's point earlier about the seniors, we do have an aging population, and I think there's an importance that we need to sustain on our services for senior citizens and continuing to look for services we can provide and maintain for that community, as well as what we can do for active adult type of housing and services. The next one I have on my list is, I guess would be generally broadly described as kind of land use. Master plan, I think it's imperative that we put all eyes on that. That is it's the document that will have the greatest impact for us in the going forward period in this arena. And I think we need to approach it from the standpoint of cutting as much of the overdevelopment or the propensity or the ability to overdevelop. We need to keep things under some manageable, including, obviously green space and lower density wherever possible. Fiscal, we've touched on that. The tax rate, I think it's imperative that we maintain it the way it is, and that we take our auxiliary type of services and most of the things that we need to compromise on as opposed to the core services. Code compliance, I think Michael mentioned that earlier as well. I'd say a big issue. We have a lot of houses in our area that are a little long in the tooth, and it's not because they're built in 1960 whatever, but because in some cases people haven't maintained them or sustained them in the most appropriate manner. I know we have an initiative going on for reviewing our code compliance, and I think we need to ensure that we make that as robust as possible. Taxes, I think I covered that earlier, the fiscal side, fiscal responsibility, balancing budget, all that kind of stuff. And then, green initiatives, it gets back to that. What can we do locally to ensure we are being responsible, but also doing it in a manner that is consistent with what's good for our city, whether it's cost savings or eliminating local pollution, and that sort of thing. That's my short list. How's that?
Okay. Moving now to, I guess Adrian isn't here yet.
He said you can skip him.
Huh?
He said you can skip him.
Yeah, I suspect we probably covered a
Well,
lot.
having done that, and city manager, I see you've been doing a good job of trying to keep up with this because I'm not able to.
Well, what I'd like to do is, if whenever we get a list, we'll come up with a compilation, and Dan and somebody will send it out to you guys to make sure it's accurate. And we'll try to put some action words onto what people want. For example, promoting workforce development, combating veteran, and that kind of thing.
One of the things I would like to add, and that is we continue to focus on public safety.
Yeah.
That be a priority. Of course, continue to do that. And along with that, city manager and to the council as a whole, I think we need to continue to focus on emergency management, as we're still within this COVID, this pandemic area.
Yeah, I'll include that. It is in our organization, our emergency management is part of our public safety operation. So we'll include that in that first line. Safety.
Making sure we continue to do that. Along those lines, and I think you got the other ones, you know, the smart cities and make sure we do that. I was trying to wait before we moved on to make sure we had some input from update what his thoughts on it. That's agreeable with the rest of the council. Move on.
Can I just say one more thing, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, please, a little lighter. I'm sorry, Inga, I just can't hear it here.
I'm sorry. Okay, is this better?
Yes.
Okay, I'd just like to add one more thing. And I don't want it to be assumed, but I know we do it pretty well, but we can always improve our communication. So just communicating effectively with the public on everything that we're doing and, you know, have no surprises. We want to make sure that they're aware of, you know, certainly our priorities and how we're moving forward. But, you know, like things like the ice rink, we want to make sure they're informed with what's going on with that. And certainly other issues that they're looking at and want to hear about.
Got it.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman.
Sure.
All righty. Hearing no other additions, why don't we move on now to the item for lobbyist agenda for the next General Assembly session. I would like, I don't know, because this is public, I don't know how much of that we want to discuss openly now, and that's a general question.
That's a really good
Well, I can chime in with one item that I know is just kind of a non-sensitive one, which is getting back to that traffic issue. I would like for us to pursue greater latitude in speed camera locations. There was obviously a tragedy on Church Road last year, and the state legislature, through the efforts of our legislators, was able to get additional latitude to allow the placement of a camera on that road where it would otherwise not have qualified. And I think there are a number of locations in the city where we could stand to benefit from some similar latitude so that we can make things a little safer in our community.
And wasn't it proposed at one time that we actually get the authority to do that on our own? And why do we have to state for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Many years ago, there was a big hullabaloo about that, and I'm not sure why it ended up or how it ended up the way it is. But the way it is right now, it's pretty limiting what we can do. So I'm with you. I think whatever enhanced latitude we have, we should take the opportunity to pursue. And I'm not sure how best to construct that, whether it's a series of one-off requests or whether it's some greater latitude to help on our community streets.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to also say, I think that it's for all of us, and I think it's important, is that we look at how we address, and I know I just talked with some of the staff earlier, on the tourification on our water system and seeing what we can do about improving that and getting those pipes related and getting money and support to do that. And that's not just on the state level, but on the federal as well. We've been having some of those dialogues, I know, and just trying to think, because my real feeling is, as I shared with Senator Cardin yesterday, is that, you know, we're going to probably having, when we come out of this, some real infrastructure issues that are moving forward and trying to rebuild and do things. And I'd like for us as a city to be at the top of the list on some of those things. So, and I know when I talk with George, we're doing that, but I think that'll be a good thing for us to put on that list.
Well, we've been working toward that prior to your arrival and with Mayor Robinson and who's the guy?
Mr. Forehand.
Mr. Forehand. And one of the things we should work through is that a lot of the money is passed through the state of Maryland. And once they get it, then they put their constraints and regulations on it. And so in some instances, we can only get the money via loan, and that kind of thing. So if we could get the lobbyist or get somebody to, come up with some direct to the city grant from the Fed, that's what we need.
Yeah, and that's
otherwise,
the
you don't have to borrow money.
Yeah, so, and that's the intent. So but we put them on there and try to secure funding for that as well.
Okay.
We also want to maintain and keep the racetrack on that list as well.
Yeah, we do have to close that, keep that on mind.
Right, right.
Yes.
And also we, in addition to what, we're asking our lobbyists to do, we need to talk about how we are going to engage our legislators to move our priorities forward and what we'd like them to do.
That's it. Understood.
I got one, Mr. Mayor, which is a shared highway revenue. So we've been hearing for years now that those funds are going to continue to dry up at the federal and state level. And that will have a direct impact on our budget as well as budgets of other municipalities. So we need to work with lawmakers both to see whether someone has a spine to raise the gas tax, to replenish those funds, or if there's another mechanism to replenish those funds, or we need to start actively planning to do without those funds as they slowly get phased out, because that will have a huge impact on us. And then the only other thing I would just suggest, I know there's a lot of items that statutorily make more sense, the city attorney, for us to consider in closed session related to specific items of ongoing negotiation. Does that make sense, or am I off base there?
You can discuss in closed session matters relating to negotiations for the acquisition of real property. Most of these topics that I think you have for the legislator, for your lobbyists, are not closed session subjects.
Other topics that might come up might be, though.
Yeah.
As you outlined.
You'll obviously have to address that on a case by case.
Understood. I might suggest then that we touch base with our city attorney and see if we can't get a closed session very soon for us to talk about any closed session items that might be relevant, and I can run those by you, Madam City Attorney, in advance.
That'd be good
to get your permission and sign off.
Do we all? Oh, go ahead. Sorry. I just had a question for you, Alyssa, when you're done.
Okay, so I just wanted to put back on the table in front of you something that I raised before, and you may collectively decide you just don't want to go there, but we need a change in certain provisions of state law in order to allow us to build that second solar array that was under our original contract with Tesla. I'm not sure where they are with the first one, although Dan probably knows it's moving forward, but I don't know exactly where it is. But we only have 3 years under our agreement with Tesla to get a change in the law that would allow them to move forward with the second array without any concern that they're going to get held up by the regulatory agencies.
That's an excellent point. Thank you for raising that one. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Got it.
Councilwoman Harris, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Alyssa, would we take to closed session if we wanted to discuss or look at our current lobbyists and look at perhaps changing to another?
Yeah, that you can do in closed session.
Okay. I'd also like us to consider that as well, or to look at that. Thank you.
So October 5th is going to be a long night, I think. So would you all want to close session then?
I
I can stay up all night. It's gonna be a long night. So, all right, I'll plug it in for the 5th.
Okay. Any other comments, thoughts? Anyone? I think we can make a list from there and move forward.
Got it.
All righty. Did someone? That was it, okay. All right, moving on to the master plan. And I'm trying to get what's the.
Oh, I'm not sure when that was.
This is one, was requested by, Mayor Pro Tem, as part of the,
Yeah, this was, Adrian put this one on, so.
Okay, that's.
He's in limbo here.
Well, I would certainly suggest, I attended the first 2 chat sessions and they were excellent, but there only had like 16 to 21 people that were there, and that includes, you know, the people from Park and Planning. So it would be great if more of us attended and encourage the public to attend. I know there's 6 more remaining. But, you know, I noticed there were 2 of our residents that were very vocal, mostly women. So it would be great if we had more participation on those, because they're really looking for citizen feedback on this matter.
Okay. All right, at this point, when we've lost Michael as well, if there aren't any other comments on the master plan, I think we'll keep moving and come back to that as well.
Okay.
Why don't we? And
If I may, I'd like to chime in just a real to Councilman Turner's point is that.
I'm sorry, before, if you could, a little louder.
Sure thing. To the point made earlier, which I think is driven by the fact that people don't fully understand the implications of what the plan will end up having on our community. I think to a certain degree, I think we almost need a communications plan, something that I think Ingrid was highlighting earlier, which kind of simplifies the issues, right? Which is tell us what you would like to see in these areas, and then, you know, staff and others try and translate that into the actual zones and whatnot. Because to be honest, a lot of times when you start getting that far into the weeds, you know, people start to tune out. And I think that if you kind of look at a piece of property and say, hey, what do you envision there? Instead of talking about it in terms of this should be zoned accordingly, I think it should be the other way around, which is, all right, community, what do we think this property should look like, or this area, or these properties? And then go back and try and, you know, drive it that way. Because I think a lot of people, when you start talking about zoning and zoning types and levels and all these, you know, acronyms, that people just kind of start to fade out. So I think we really need to Ingrid's point, need to get more people engaged in this process, and I think that means we got to change the way we're having the conversation. And I think we ought to put that on our planning staff to have that type of conversation, so that we get more people engaged. And it wouldn't hurt if someone could take care of this COVID, so people would be more comfortable as well.
Thank you, Councilman. Good. Any other thoughts? And we were discussing the master plan. So.
Oh, okay. I agree with before that we get lost in the weeds, but we do need broad-based input from residents. And I could be wrong, but in the last 5 years, the sense that I get from residents, and anyone else, please feel welcome to chime in, they want to see existing low-density things kept as they are. They want to see existing agricultural space and green space kept as it is. They want to see us maximizing forests as much as humanly possible and not letting forests and fields get torn up. But in the areas where we know we can anticipate economic redevelopment, like at Sears, it's going to make sense for us to pursue smart growth policies where we do like we did with Sears, with fully integrated projects that take into account traffic impacts. The other thing is related to that. We discussed, and maybe actually this, I should have brought this up, I apologize, under the lobbyist section, but we can talk about it elsewhere as well. We may want to consider talking to the county about their openness to working with us so that developer impact fees, which I think total like some $20,000 per unit when new development goes in. We need to work out a better deal where more of that money goes to projects earmarked for the areas where the development is happening. Because that's one of our biggest issues is developers are paying millions in fees, which they don't like, but it's going into a pot that doesn't come back to Bowie, which our residents hate. So we've created a situation where we've literally managed to upset everybody in the process. So we need to work with the county, and I've sensed talking to some of our council members, there may be an openness to that about earmarking some of those development impact dollars towards projects specifically in Bowie, or even just giving us a portion of the money that we can earmark towards projects related to infrastructure improvement.
Okay. Councilmember? Pro Tem?
No comments from me. Okay.
Okay. Any other comments on the master plan at this point? Hearing none, let's move on to taxes. Well, I think that falls in line.
We all hate taxes, let's have no more.
Yeah, no, I think,
And so a part of this too is as we look at taxes and all, we really need to look at our fiscal position as we move forward.
Sure.
And making sure that we have to make the hard decisions as need be on what we're going to do about taxes at this point. If we're going to maintain the kind of city that we know and love right now, and with the services that we currently have.
yeah.
So having said that, I'll be going around and we'll all just comment, but I'll give Councilwoman at Large Harrison first comments.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. City Manager, Al, I want to get a good understanding about what do you think the what happened with the canceling the ice rink? What does that have? What impact would that have on taxes?
Well, I don't think it's going to have any impact currently. We do have $18 million unused. And so as a result of canceling it, we did get a boost to the fund balance, just simple arithmetic there. What we're concerned about in particular is what happens in January, February, and March with the monies that we get from the state of Maryland.
Yeah.
If the projected revenues that should come from them, or supposed to come from them, are stable and then we're okay. Then we're okay. But if they aren't, then we may have to make some adjustments. Understanding also that in the little update I gave you all in two manager's updates ago, we have seen some lower revenues in amusement taxes, hotel, motel taxes, and that sort of thing. But also, we're spending less money because we're kind of hunkered down and doing and providing. So that's balancing out. So like I said the other day, I'm not sure what's going to happen 8 months from now. Right now, as we go month to month, we're doing okay. At some point, depending on what you all want to do with that $18 million,
Right.
if that is reallocated and repurposed, next year or the year before, after some significant COVID deficit that could arise, there will have to be you'll have to deal with either a tax rate increase or a service reduction, because we've just gone too long, a very long time. Most cities, like this, especially one like ours, maybe every 2 or 3 years, there's an addition to the millage rate, but we haven't done that. But we're going to have to face that. You all are going to have to face that either next year or the year after. Sure.
And specifically, what can that $18 million go towards?
18?
That money has not been allocated presently.
Right, what can specifically be allocated toward?
So that's the remainder of your bond proceeds.
Right.
In terms of that. The city would really want to look at reallocation of those dollars towards other infrastructure projects that you have on the books. Other recreational opportunities, other physical infrastructure things. That'd be a good location to excuse me, reallocation of those funds. And those dollars and items within your capital program end up being a lot of sort of one-time expenditures that have an impact on the city's budget. And as we discussed back during the budget season, that's where we've got a lot of the challenge within our budget today, not just the general revenue and the general expenses of the city, but the sheer weight of the number of capital projects that are anticipated for the city in the coming years. Those are probably the largest drivers in terms of an impact on needing to look at the revenue of the city. There is a lot of capital infrastructure needs that the city has, and ultimately that's what causes the budget challenges that we have in the future. To echo in regards to the city manager for where we are with the budget and where we have to see the state is at, two large sources of revenue that we get from the state in terms of shared revenue is the motor vehicle fuel tax and income tax. And as we heard from the comptroller, no doubt those things are going to be impacted because of COVID. People are driving less, so that has generated less motor vehicle fuel tax, and also impacts on employment is going to have some implications in regards to the income tax. And as this is prolonged and moves along, if people aren't driving as much, that's going to have that continued effect on motor vehicle sales, motor vehicle fuel tax. And then the challenges in terms of income taxes, not just for the people that have lost their work, but people that are now mobile and may choose to no longer be in Maryland and could work remotely that they hadn't before.
Right.
Those are long-term issues that we have to consider and see what could happen, but it's very real threats for us.
Also, there's about a $800,000 debt service related to the bond. And currently, I think it goes up as we get older. But that's something we have to spend as a result of that.
Okay. And I wanted to say also, the mayor mentioned it, I think at our last meeting about, with the state and the budget. And I keep hearing in many of my conversations with about how it's not just, impact isn't as great for this particular fiscal year, but for the next 2 years, we're going to see an even larger impact. So we just kind of have to be prepared definitely for 22 and 23.
Mr. Mayor, if I could chime in on something real quick. So Dan, you covered some of the things I was going to ask about like the overview of our budget and what's driving kind of our. So can you zero in a little bit on what is specifically driving our shortfalls now? You mentioned capital projects. Are there any particular that are happening? I know that stormwater management is, for instance, an area we don't have a lot of control, but is very expensive. So
there certainly is an issue associated with stormwater management projects in regards to taking a look at the requirements of the state for essentially water quality in the Chesapeake Bay. And if you take a look contained within the capital budget, there are millions and millions of dollars associated with stormwater retrofit projects. Our public works is moving more towards stream rehabilitation projects in terms of meeting those overall stormwater goals. All of that has been absorbed by the city without any new revenue source to accommodate it. So much like the city created a police department without any new revenue source to go along with that, all of that has been absorbed over time. So the challenge, there's not any one project that is the cause of what it might be. It is that collective decision of all of those expenses. So when we choose to invest $1 million or $2 million in the construction of a new trail, that impacts it. The dollars that we have to spend on stream retrofit projects, not as discretionary. We have to spend those funds. As our roads will deteriorate if we do not get the state shared revenues to support that effort, our budget is going to have to accommodate road repairs. Residents of Bowie like their smooth streets, and we want to provide them, but you need the revenue to be able to do that. It's difficult to say this project causes the problem or that project causes the problem. You really want to look at your budget in terms of what do you have to do in terms of a requirement from some other agency or just a requirement in terms of the demands of the services that we provide to the citizens versus things that end up being more discretionary in terms of what we would like to do and what we would choose to do.
And that kind of gets us closer to where I wanted to go about what we have to do and what we would like to do. For the stormwater management, do you have a rough estimate? Because that's a huge unfunded mandate. Do you have a rough estimate of what that's cost us? Because I know it's expensive. And it's in past budget years and future budget years. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you don't have the number now, that's fine. But if you can circle back with us.
Yeah, and if I could, and then we'll go back around, but just, if I could ask you to give us that 30,000 foot view. When we went through the budget and all, you talked about based upon where our spending levels were, where it was costing us. And as we were going into our research to do it, if you had an idea of what we would need to do as a tax increase, kind of cutting to the chase.
Right.
What was that delta of what we would probably need to do moving forward? And that's pre-COVID even, and I understand that. But at that time, what was that delta looking like to keep up with the spending at the rate we were with just the general things?
So pre-COVID, with the revenue projection and expenditure projections that we have, we actually have incorporated into the budget anticipating 6 cents worth of property tax increases. And with that 6 cents worth of property tax increases, there is still insufficient funds to ultimately meet all of the infrastructure and capital project demands that are anticipated in the capital project going into the future. So we are, I believe, 2 to 3 years out from essentially running out of funds associated with that. And that is including projections of an additional 6 cents worth of tax increases in the budget that you've been presented.
Right.
So if you're looking at what that delta is, without that 6 cents, they're near immediate.
Well, so we were projected to be at 43 cents, currently going to 48, I believe, was it? And so, but we haven't done any of that. And we would do that. And what we would end up doing, instead of taking $10 million chunks out of our fund balance, we would only take $2 or $3 million chunks out of the fund balance, and it would last a whole lot longer. So you, instead of being up against the wall 2 years from now, it would be 8 to 10 years from now, but you would have an opportunity to make adjustments.
And that's the question. And I'm saying, so you're saying that 6 cents won't do it, we need to do it.
Yeah. And in terms of it won't do it is not fully the answer with that, because many of the capital projects that we have, many of the capital projects we have end up getting deferred. And the challenge with the budget that we have is there's been a number of capital projects in terms of goals that the city has. Maybe it's not something that's essential, that just end up getting deferred. And I'll use a good example. There's a project in there in regards to replacing the amphitheater at Allen Pond Park. It's a project a lot of people want to do. It's a great looking project. It's been designed. It's ready to go. It should have already been constructed by now had it not been deferred for the sake of looking at anticipated revenues. That project can continue to be deferred, but they'll reach a point where the existing amphitheater, it's not going to make it. It's not going to be.
And please bear with me, Daniel and city manager. as I go back to the 30,000 foot level.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, if we were to continue to do projects we currently have,
Yes.
if we were to try and move forward with those, what would we need to do with our tax rate to keep up? And I think that's what the city manager was
Over
addressing.
time, we need to increase the tax rate by 6 to 8 cents, from 40 to 48 cents. So that over a 12-year period, 15-year period, we could maximize the advantage of having the fund balance. Because right now, we're just simply consuming it.
And 6 to 8 cents, sorry, Mr. Mayor. So currently, the median Bowie home is worth $350,000, I believe. The median Bowie home is paying in city taxes at the current 40 cents rate then $1,400 just to the city in property taxes, not including Carson County, the county, and state. A 6 cent tax increase represents a $210. A 6 cent tax increase represents a $210 tax hike for the average Bowie household, again, just the city side, an 8 cent increase more. So the typical Bowie household would be paying just over $1,600 in property taxes just to the city, not incorporating anything else. That 6 cents is $210 for the average Bowie household.
So from a city budget perspective, and this is the wonderful thing about city government is the budget. What occurred was, 12, 13 years ago, the city established a police department with the intent to increase the tax rate. It never happened. The city had a decent fund balance. It absorbed that, understanding that the police department is almost a third of our budget. And so we have, to have one sworn officer is, but when you're only paying them $60,000, $70,000 a year, you're spending $250,000 between cars, weapons, and equipment. So that's what's happened from a broad perspective, and now it's coming home to roost.
Yeah.
And and we were supposed to 2 years ago add 3 pennies, and I think on page, you guys get home on page 13 of the budget, it shows, we got a diagram that shows where things intersect, things did bad, we had a big discussion. So that's what we have to deal with now. And as you all know, and my neighborhood, nobody wants any reduction in services.
Right.
Matter of fact, in my neighborhood, you want to change anything, everybody wants to beat you up because they love it over it. So I'm not sure that's going to be an option. So we're going to have to figure out a way to increase our revenues and keep the service delivery. And I think, and I'm not a proponent for it, but I'm just talking about one or two things going to have to happen a couple of years from now.
And keeping it at that 30,000 foot level, there's 2 main things that have created sort of the budget challenge that Bowie has today. It was the decision to put the police department in without having the corresponding revenue associated with it, and then the essentially unfunded mandate from the state in regards to our water quality and the stormwater projects that we have to do. Those 2 things are so significant. The city has made decisions to defer putting in that tax increase, and it has done so at the expense of deferring capital projects and capital items. And it's done so with good reason, in that in the interim years while those were going on, the city built up a very large fund balance. And so it's had money that it could spend down. The challenge now is the deferments in terms of the capital projects have gone on so long. There's a big wall of deferred items that are sitting out there. And we either need to, A, decide not to do some of those projects, so we pull them off of the list, or we need to get the revenue in place in order to accomplish those. And it's just a mismatch.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of time in terms of when that's going to happen. Can we go into the next budget year and not put in a tax increase and defer capital projects more? Yes, we can, but it's going to come to roost one day.
So yeah, one of the things, I haven't even talked about, but one of the things that we also find ourselves with is where we have talked about development.
Yeah.
And that becomes that, how much development did you offset that in growth without violating the the nature of the city, for lack of a better way to put it, of trying to keep the density down on development and housing and all too. Because I think that's a consideration we also have to take in mind as we do that.
Can I ask a question?
And so, and I think, you were gonna say something, I didn't even know.
I defer to Mr.
Okay, go ahead.
Just quick question. I know it sounds like DeForest is gonna say here too. Obviously, no one wants a tax increase, but from a fiscal government standpoint, it's eventually we have to figure out what we're gonna do here, or else it's gonna be a larger problem for our city, right? My question is on annexation, right? We say you annex some properties into the city that, assuming they want to be in the city, there's a lot of people who believe they live in Bowie, but don't actually live in Bowie, right? Hypothetically, you to annex all of those, you're bringing in more taxes. Does that not level itself out because of the services that we'll have to provide those folks as well?
So it does end up leveling itself out. So when you look at the basic structure of the city in terms of the revenues of what comes in for the services provided, the city's in a good position in regards to that. The recent example we had was with the South Lake annexation, and I'll discount to Councilman Wolfley's chagrin, the Tax Increment Financing Association.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, when South Lake ends up being fully constructed, we're receiving the full value of that tax authority. The economies of scale work out that our projections show that that would have a net 2-cent benefit on our budget. So by annexing that in and expanding through the economies of scale, having that service on there, once that's built out, which is many years from now, beyond our current issues in terms of looking at, it's going to have a net benefit in regards to 2 cents per year for all of the taxpayers within the city of Bowie. But the challenge is we've already spent those 2 cents.
Is it
and we
possible,
don't have the development here.
I'm not again, by no means proposing this, but just curious. Already existing neighborhoods that, again, right, like you drive down Church Road, some of them are in my district, some of them are not, right? They already are there. I believe they're actually in the city of Bowie when they're not in the city of Bowie. I'm wondering if there's some way to annex and still get a net gain of an increase that comes close to that 6 cents.
It's the same thing with District
possible?
4. There are a lot of neighborhoods who are actually not in District 4 and that believe they're in the city of Bowie, but they're actually not, you know.
And doesn't that number basically just come down to the property value? There's a cutoff point at which, and the type of development, I think apartments, we get more money because we don't do their trash and recycling pickup. Bigger name, but I think it's like 350,000. I could be wrong, whatever that number is for the break-even point.
In terms of the value of the property?
Yeah, so the higher the property value, the more we get in taxes, but they're not necessarily getting dramatically more.
You still have one trash can.
Right, exactly.
It's a little more
There's
full.
only so much
versus-
road.
Yeah, and there's only so much road. And ultimately, it comes down to the dollar value per acre, per road mile, per service area delivered. And so what you see in municipalities all across the country is people are looking for that density. Because if you can get on a piece of property, one $350,000 house, you know, that's pretty good. But if you get an apartment building that has, you know, 12 apartments in it, but it's valued at $1 million in that same footprint, you're able to pay less for maintaining that section of road, and well, not pay less. You have more revenue coming in to pay for that same section of road. So this is where this all interfaces then in terms of that discussion of what we want to have in terms of our master planning goals. There are many things in regards to lower density, keep things trees, keep things all of that. It has a direct revenue impact because you get a lot more value in terms of denser housing, denser development in terms of commercial and those sorts of properties in place to support the budget overall for the city. And when you're looking at the commercial properties with the higher commercial assessments that are in place today, unfortunately, the challenge today is those properties to make it are looking for even denser residential populations that are around them for their service area in order to make it be an attractive area for them to be, which is why we're talking about Sears becoming partially residential rather than just a big box.
And it'll just be a matter of time for Washington Prime as well. To Mayor Pro Tem Bluff and Councilmember DiGlamado's points, could city staff take a look at properties adjacent to the city of Bowie now? Just look at the map, and just, you know, we've talked about this before. There are a lot of neighborhoods, as Mayor well knows, as Mayor Pro Tem Bluff well
I
knows,
want to be.
that want to be in Bowie. And a lot of those neighborhoods probably generate a lot more in tax revenue than they'll cost in services.
Yeah.
We just have to get the neighborhood's consent, and obviously residents' consent.
Councilwoman, were you trying to say something? Ingrid Harrison?
I think Councilman.
No,
I agree with Mike.
Councilmember Wolfley had something.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
Four?
Yeah, just a couple of general comments. The first is going back to the issue of the proceeds from the bond that we have, the $18 million. You know, that money, which is currently in the general fund, you know, should be, and you know, we need to put a plan together for what we're going to use, what capital projects we're going to use that pool of money for, and with recognizing that we don't have to, that we will have projects that were once deferred that we would be able to fund using those proceeds should improve the bottom line financials on a year-to-year basis for the city. So we ought to have items that we ought to be able to take off of our to-do list with that $18 million and thus not require an increase in taxes to pay for them. So I think the city, we need to go and do an assessment of that, the benefit of having that money, the monies at hand, and see what that does to the out years for the city. I would also want to talk just in general at a high level about the dollars that we have in our general fund. You know, those are prepaid taxes. You know, that's money that we need to recognize as it was collected on the assumption that we were going to be using them for our services. So to the extent that we're raising taxes prior to expending funds that are absolutely needed, you know, I think we got to be careful about that. So then we also have to look at what our projections are, and I know we are in uncertain times, but we have a pattern of increased revenue, notwithstanding COVID and what might be happening, but we do have a pattern of increased revenue associated with everything from tax bases on the housing to income taxes that we need to be cognizant that we do continue to see a growth in those over the course of time. And when we put our budgets together, and I know it's a conservative methodology, which I'm in favor of, we always underestimate our revenues and overestimate our expenses, and that yields us a conservative result. But sometimes I think it also paints in more dire circumstances than we might otherwise have. That having been said, I'm not sticking my head in the sand either. I fully recognize staff's point that we need to be cognizant of what our fiscal circumstances are. Then I would say the one other thing, which is this, I think, circular logic, almost like a Ponzi scheme on the annexation stuff. If we are perpetually annexing new properties to pay the bills for our existing properties, you know, the services and whatnot, that's not sustainable. We need to be in a mode where we are managing our fiscal condition without having to rely on bringing in additional you know, properties through annexation, because we find that the others are not carrying their weight. It's a slippery slope. Will be, with that logic, will be as big as the state itself. So at some point it catches up, and I think we have to address the fact that we need to, pardon me, we need to keep our expenditures in line with what our revenues are.
Yes. Hey, thank you. One thing I would like to add though, before, to one of those comments and just to be sure is, even with our reserves, our fund balance, we gotta be careful in maintaining that so we don't lose our triple A bond rating as well. So we need to make sure we keep those reserves to a point that we don't have any issues there as well.
Good question.
Councilman,
When you get-
Mayor Pro Tem, excuse me.
Yeah, that's fine. When are we expected to go back to Moody's?
Well, we're not planning to do that anytime soon. We may get an update on our rating after October, because normally they take a look at us once a year.
Will they look at us and say, you guys have canceled an $26 million bond that we've given to you guys with no strategic direction, and you have never increased taxes in the last 20 years? That's not really in the best fiduciary responsibility for our city yourselves.
Well, I don't think that they'll take a hit for canceling the project. You know, they know we did that. It's just a matter of, they'll look at our fund balance, they'll look at our management practices.
I'm more concerned about the length of time we've gone without a tax increase.
That was a plus. With them at one point.
Just save us some time. Could you just summarize what Moody's has told us in the past? Because they've always given us like, here's what you're doing well, here's areas of concern.
Yeah, well, Byron and I went up there a year ago.
Sorry.
And we actually made, Dan was supposed to go, but he couldn't go, he missed the trip. So we went and we made pitches to Moody's, Fitch, and Standard & Poor's. They liked our management style. They liked how we were managing our money. They liked the fact that we had a fund balance. They were impressed by the fact that we had raised taxes. They noted that our assessments of our properties had gone up and helped with that, and that's a fact. And so the mayor's right. One of the things that's important is the fund balance. And that was the thing that impressed them most of all, that we had a strong fund balance and good management practices, and
The city of Bowie is in a very strong fiscal position.
Right.
And we're in a strong fiscal position because we have strong revenues, we've got a strong tax base that supports it.
We have unlimited
And
taxing power.
We have more taxing power.
No, but we do. That's one of the things Moody's brings up. We don't have a cap on what we can raise, unlike the county.
We can raise more money, absolutely.
We don't have a cap.
And the fiscal challenges that we have are sort of self-made. There are a lot of discretionary things that we get to choose in regards to what we do versus what we don't do. Councilman Wolfley had addressed core services. We can take care of our core services. We're not in a position where we're looking and saying, oh, we need to get rid of this, we need to get rid of that. There are many other municipalities out there that are in much more dire, tenuous financial circumstances than the city of Bowie. We have the capacity, we have the ability. We're just running out of time in terms of having to make those ultimate decisions on what we really want to do. And it's not urgent. You don't have to decide something in the next week, month, or even the next year. But it's something that for the long term can't keep getting deferred. We have to make decisions in regards to truly value these capital projects. Do we want to do the amphitheater in Allen Pond Park? And if we want to do that, we need to commit and make the decision and make sure that we've got the revenue to support that, to do that. If we say we're never going to do that, let's cancel the project. That's just one example of many things that we have to decide. Do we want to do it?
the other thing is our debt
I want to add one other comment.
Sorry, hopefully Al was
Excuse me. Hey, hold up. Councilwoman from District 4 was speaking, and then we'll recognize you, Councilman.
Sure. Thank you, no problem.
On some of the capital improvement projects, like let's say, for example, for some of them, we got outside grants or outside money from elsewhere, and that money essentially isn't used towards those projects anymore, kind of frame that up, what does that then do for our budget? Like, what does that then do with that money? Like, does that put us in a much better position, or what? Or do we must reallocate it somewhere else?
So outside third-party money is extremely small. That is a very negligible part of the city's overall.
Right, no, I'm just asking, so like,
But
hypothetically.
if we do get revenues from somewhere else, so
Right.
we talked before in regards to, it would be great if we got funds from the federal government associated with industry. If we could apply those dollars that came from federal or state resource, that would remove $1 million, $2 million, $5 million from what we have to pay. And that gives us overall more time to address some of those issues. But a lot of those dollars, the difference is the expenses that are ongoing, the ones that are incurred year in, year out. We have to pay insurance on this building, year in, year out. That always comes along. What we don't have to do is construct a new piece of artwork on the grounds of the city. And we have so much discretionary spending that we have at our availability. We can fix what we want to do. The challenge is, how do we right size what is in our eyes in terms of what we really like to do versus what we have to do.
Okay. Councilman Dufour.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I want to apologize. It's a little tough to hear and to know if I'm interrupting or just trying to get the.
Oh, no problem. Right.
So apologies. I was only going to make one brief comment, which was to the assistant city manager's comment about prioritizing these projects and deciding what we do or don't want to do. I think there's also an opportunity to look at them and talk about the degree to which we want to do them. So I can build the Taj Mahal, or I can build a more modest structure. So there's a lot of, I think, opportunity to look at what's on our plate and say, you know what, maybe very nice is good enough as opposed to deluxe. So that's all I was going to comment on. So as we're looking at what we want to do, I'd say we also want to look at the amount of the expenditures instead of just say, no, I don't want to do the amphitheater. Say, well, you know what? I'd like to do the amphitheater, but only at a 70% because there's a lower acceptable price tag with consistent with lower level quality or luxury or whatever.
Hey,
I apologize. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilman. One of the things I'd ask, is it possible for you to put together as we move forward, and this is just city manager and staff, kind of and we talked briefly about just financial position of where we are, what those CIP programs or things are that we see and that we can kind of list out and go back through them.
Well, we have a major report coming on the CIP.
Okay.
That's forthcoming. And so, and we get Brian gives us a monthly financial position. We can forward that to you and let you take a look at that.
We were on a call yesterday with Senator Cardin, talking about the what's impending for local governments throughout Prince George's County because of Senate Republicans' failure to enact the CARES Act 2, which would have given us a lot of money. Correct me if I'm wrong, but he made it seem like it was going to be, I think, worse than a lot of people are actually expecting. Now, that could just be partisanship, but I think he has a point to that, right? But is it possible to, at least for the public's sake, maybe a report in the next coming weeks about what we see COVID having an impact on? I know that's kind of hard to determine because we don't know what the state revenues look like. It's not.
Well, I talked to Byron. I can have Byron make a projection for you as best as he can, as long as we know that he doesn't control the information coming from the city.
And that's part of that, and I think I was mentioning that's a part of that next item we get to when we talk about the city's position, even as it relates to COVID now. And then a projection moving forward. And we understand that. Nobody, when we went into our budget session, we knew we didn't know what. We were doing this without really taking any impacts of COVID in and doing that. But yeah, if he could give us I don't want to say best guess, just a feeling about where we are with
Professional
that.
projection, what he thinks is gonna happen, because he's the expert.
Mhm.
And, go ahead, you were saying something?
No,
I was agreeing.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh.
I was just agreeing.
Oh, okay.
Those were the
I'm
murmurs
hearing,
of
I'm
agreement.
telling you. Yeah. So if we could do that, and then that would give us an idea, and then it'd probably be incumbent upon all of us to do, I think as, we'll have the CIP coming up and we'll be able to do it. If we verse ourselves on that, I think, as Councilman DeFore said, we can look at what can we reduce, what can we look at, as we talked about before with the golf course and different things, about where we could really end up with those kind of things and the amphitheater and that. And if the city had any recommendations on any of that, I think we would all be open to hearing what your thoughts are on that as well.
If I could, Mr. Mayor, real quick. Are you okay? If I could real quick, because I know we're running low on time, so I'll try to be fast. If we could also just make sure along the way that we are fully maximizing our tax differential opportunities with the county. They've lowered their tax rates twice with the anticipation we would raise ours. We didn't. Kudos us. But we need to make sure that we're continuing to do that. Councilmember Ndikumanu brought up grants. Obviously, we want to consider pursue those as best we can. Sorry. I think we're all agreed on annexation, looking at options for that. We have a lot of people in Bowie that are not in Bowie, and we could use their community, their fellowship, and their money. Parks and planning. I understand that other municipalities in Prince George's County are paying parks and planning less. I would like to pay parks and planning less. We send Maryland National Capital Park and Planning $60 million a year collectively in taxes, and we get $6 million in services. That is an injurious wrong that I want the public to be aware of, and we need to work on that. So that's a broad strokes thing.
Wait, Mike, I gotta
Yeah.
get some clarity here now. You're talking about the personal tax that's on our tax bill?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what action would you have us take here?
I would have us work every avenue possible to ensure that we are only paying Maryland National Capital Parks and Planning what we are getting in services, or pay them closer to an amount of what we are getting in services. And I believe there are other communities that have a better deal than we do, and I'm going to further explore that separately. But I just kind of want that.
County legislative issue?
It may be county, it may be state.
Okay.
Yeah, and Michael, just as a point for you for clarification, remember too, though, that a part of what we'll find too, though, is that we end up paying a part of the tax, at least the funding, for all of the public spaces that Bowie residents are able to use as well. So it's not just what's confined to in the city of Bowie, but like Watkins Park. We all have to pay because it's open to everyone and those kind of things. So we can still do what you're saying. I just wanted to clarify that. A part of that is for all the venues that Park and Planning does that are open to the county as a whole, that we pay a part of that as well. So
We'll find out what the formula is for the tax.
Yeah.
Point totally taken, but I will say for the record, when we needed them to make extremely basic improvements at Fox Hill Park, it was like pulling teeth, and the state literally had to threaten and audit to get them to improve bathrooms that were dilapidated. I get complaints all the time about the management of Rockledge Park, which looks gross, right? So Parks and Planning, we send them an awful lot of money, and we are not getting anywhere near that level of investment back, and I'm going on the record with that. The new ice rink. So we canceled the old one. We all committed publicly to working on a new one. We got to take that into consideration. However we do that.
Well, it's just the opposite of what you said, opposite of what you meant. You said that the old ice rink is what we had left.
Right.
We canceled the new one.
Right.
You said the opposite.
Well, okay. We canceled the previous ice rink new project. We are all committed to working on a new ice rink project
All right.
of some variety.
Yeah, right.
That's going to be expensive.
And that's, what about that task force?
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to get to.
That's what we're going to
Well, that
get
gets to the next.
Is that the next item?
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean,
cool. 'Cause I
We're
think
kind of waiting on.
we need to, yeah.
Okay, and then the only other, we'll get to that. The only other item I have, because I know we're running low on time, we don't have as much control over the county and state's tax rates that we pay in property taxes, the 11 cents to the state and the whatever it is, dollars in the county. With the pandemic impacting the state and county budgets, and with the Kerwin Commission coming down the pike, I don't think any residents, frankly, understand the tax implications of Kerwin. We're talking about dramatic increases in property taxes to fund the Kerwin Commission. Everybody, I think, broadly agrees with the Kerwin Commission's aims to accelerate school improvements, to pay teachers more, to improve pre-K. I think we're all agreed. But the tax implications are dramatic. And I think residents need to understand this is coming down the pike. And we collectively are going to feel a lot of our residents' concern as that moves forward. A lot of that's going to come back our way, and we need to consider how we're communicating around that, how we're working with our state and county lawmakers around that issue, and how we are planning our own tax increases or not tax increases as we move forward, because residents have no idea what's going to hit them when that comes down the pike, and eventually it will. And that's the only point I have on taxes.
All right. Any other comments? If not, I think we've kind of got our walking order. So the next thing we'll talk about is if you can kind of sum up for the city's financial position as it relates to COVID as best you can.
Well, currently, we're in good shape. We are on course with our projections. There have been some revenues that we haven't collected, but we aren't spending as much money, so we're in good stead. What I don't know, as I mentioned earlier, I don't know what's going to happen 6 months from now, but we managed it, and we collect our data on a monthly basis. So we're doing well, as long as we get our money back for reimbursement, that $3.2 million, and so we're on course and on glide path. But if the state revenues are reduced, then that'll have an impact on our, and that's what we're concerned about.
Have they made any payments on the invoices, or have they?
We've gotten some money in from hotel motel taxes, but less money. But we're like I said, we're also spending less, so things kind of cancel.
What about from the invoices sent to the county?
So
as far as that 3.7, I believe it was.
Just in the past week, our finance was sending the first batch of reimbursement requests. So we have not actually received funds back in, but my understanding is we've already sent those to the county to be processed. So to echo what the city manager had said, in terms of our anticipation for our direct COVID expenses that we incurred over this period of time, there will be sufficient funding through the CARES Act allocation, which will be federal dollars, which will be reimbursed through the county for taking care of that. Our longer term issues, large source of revenue for us is property taxes. We likely are not going to be seeing any impact on property taxes for at least 3 years from now in terms of until property reassessments come along. The more immediate issue is going to be, as I mentioned before, those statewide shared revenue sources in terms of income taxes and motor vehicle fuel taxes. Those are where we're going to see some of that impact coming along. Personal property tax a little bit to a lesser degree.
Yeah, it's $1 million and some dollars, but it depends, if a business has closed, then they can't pay, and that's the problem with that. So that's not a lot of money, but it's still $1 million.
Impacts of that. All right. Any other questions from any council members on this item? If not, let's, thank you very much. Let's move to the process for committee interviews and appointments during COVID.
Yeah.
All right, what I think what we're going through right now is to set up Zoom interviews. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, I think that regardless of what we decide, we have to make a decision today, right? I mean, we are behind our city committees. And if the Bowie Blade says one more time that we miss our own self-imposed deadline, I'm gonna be really upset. Yeah. So, I mean, and they're right, but we do need to get this task force done with ICE. I know there's education, diversity, and maybe one other committee that has some vacancies that we need to do. I forgot whose point, I think it may have been you, but I think Zoom is fine to do the interviews as long as we are all committed to picking a day next week and getting it done. And I want to apologize to you, Alyssa, because I know that Yom Kippur is on Monday, and I totally got that. So I don't think my council poll should exist the way it does, but we should find some time next week.
I'm not sure that we can decide on that date now, as much as push it out.
We could.
Unless, you know, I will tell you that I look at my schedule and everybody.
So, I mean, I guess
everything.
the first part to my question is, are we all committed to doing Zoom, or do we all just want to review resumes and set names in?
I think my thought is that we continue with the process that we have, but we all get a chance to just do a brief interview with each of the individual candidates and go that way. That's my thought, but that goes back. Now, what I was gonna say is, for me, moving forward, what time are we looking to try and do this becomes the question.
I mean, I think it should just be sometime next week or early the week after.
Yeah, but I mean, I like at 5, 6 in the evening, 7.
Whatever works.
Because for me, a good day is the first Thursday. Because that way
Just
I can start really early, like at 5:30.
I could
Okay,
start.
excuse me, Mayor, may I make a comment?
Yes, please, go ahead, Will.
So just, I know you guys, this has been long standing of waiting, but just remember, just because we pick a date does not necessarily mean that the applicants will be available for that date. So I know, Mayor Pro Tem Buffalo, your intentions were great to try to do it for Monday, but that was pretty much short notice for me to try to get to all the applicants. Right now, we're at 18 applicants. So I don't know their availability. So we might have to extend it a week further to give me time to get with them and make sure that they're available for the date that we select and the time. So just to put that in your minds to think about too.
Can I make a suggestion, Mr. Mayor? Oh, well, thank you for that, if I could. We maybe we could offer this Thursday at 5 and before our council meeting on October the 5th. Does that sound okay?
That's possible. Oh, I was gonna say even Thursday and Friday.
I can't do
Let's,
it.
I'm gonna leave Friday alone. For
Well,
myself.
what I'm saying by that is that gives that a chance to pick a day between, you know, we have
I guess
Thursday and Friday. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you, Councilwoman.
Can I make a suggestion? Instead of doing it this week and rushing it, as Awilda mentioned, we have a council meeting on the 19th. How about we look at doing it the week of the 12th through the 15th, and then we can approve them on the 19th at our council meeting?
I don't disagree, but we have waited months at this point to at least get this iceberg task force up and running. My recommendation, my ask members are that we get at least that committee up and running this week, or.
Okay, I could agree to that.
So the rest, I mean, we can take our time on, but we've kind of delayed on the iceberg task force. That's the only one that right now is a priority, at least personally for me, so we can get that up and running.
I think some of the other committees.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, they're all priorities, but I'm saying that,
I am.
that we can get up and
What are
running.
your thoughts on that? Councilwoman?
That's a great idea. I agree that that's certainly,
So you can do the ice rink on Thursday
Yeah.
and on Friday, depending on if we have to move it over in case someone else needs to.
Are we doing like Thursday and the 5th, like you said, or Thursday and Friday?
You two trying to get out of doing anything on Friday.
Are they both the same time, starting at 4 o'clock?
I got an appointment with
What time,
Don, right?
what time? Well, let me check. Before, are you good with that?
Yeah, the one item I got a concern with is the 5 o'clock aspect of it. I got it, if I want to say a day job, but if we could push it back to like 6 o'clock, that's good.
yeah.
What works for you? Yeah. Councilwoman, District 4,
What day? Thursday?
what time? Thursday at 6, is that okay with you?
That's fine.
You don't even enjoy it.
All right, Thursday at 6?
I might not be able to make it, but you all go ahead.
6 on Thursday doesn't work for you?
No, it does not, but that's okay. Go ahead.
Prefer us to move to Friday?
Late, that's fine. I've submitted the names of the people that I would like to help task.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
that's fine.
Mr. Mayor, so it sounds like we'll do 6 on Thursday, plus anyone who we can get to Thursday will get to on Friday.
Yeah, we're trying to get to them on Friday.
Sounds-
Okay?
I'm not sure I'll be able to do Friday, but I think I'll be able to do Thursday.
What did the first say?
He can't do Friday.
You can't do Friday before?
No, but then I can do Thursday, but not Friday, I think.
Didn't we just say Thursday?
He wants to do Friday too.
We'll see how it shakes out, and then we'll address that.
Yeah.
All right, thanks a lot, DeFore.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Councilwoman. Are there any other items that anyone needs to discuss real quick before we adjourn, because we are 5 minutes behind at this point? I'll just go real quick, just as a closing. Councilmember from District 1.
This is the most on time we've ever been for something like this, and I'm so proud of everyone. Thank you for taking this. We had a lot of debate today, but this is what democracy is about. We're moving forward on some really great things. The staff got some direction. I'm really grateful to the mayor's leadership. I'm grateful to my colleagues. Thank you, Alyssa. Sorry for pulling you away on the weekend, and staff, and I will see you all soon.
All right, thank you. Councilmember from District 2.
I'm good. Thank you very much. I appreciate everybody's time and energy on the subject.
Hey, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem, District 3.
No, I think, again, thanks staff. I thank anyone who's watching on the Saturday, the residents especially who are watching live on TV. I do think that we should continue over time to do more of these. I know you guys are going to hate me for saying that, but I do think that we should get together regularly, especially after November as things shake out in a different sense for us, post-COVID, fingers crossed, and see how this day stuff shakes up. So we should definitely continue to do these things. So that's all.
Councilwoman Ande Bumadu.
Everything they have all said, I agree with.
Okay. City staff, anything you'd like to add? Thank you. Alyssa, anything?
No, I just wanted to say that an apology was not required about the holiday thing. I just was not sure that you all were aware, and I thought you might want to move.
Yeah, no.
Thank you. Council member at large.
Oh, thank you. Just want to say thank you to all of you all and certainly the city staff. But I agree wholeheartedly with our Mayor Pro Tem that we need to keep up this sort of communication where we dialogue with each other in more of an informal setting, because it's certainly something that we need to all be kind of on the same page, and especially when we come before the public and our council session.
Right. And I'd like to say thank you to everybody for your thoughts, your insights, your time, your dedication. And as we said earlier, Black Lives Matter. And the last thing I'd like to put on there is for everybody to think about as it came, because I didn't want to forget about it, is I would like for us to consider, as we move forward, having a Saturday once or twice during the year in which we actually hold our council meetings, so that those in our community who are much older, for us, when we start at 8 or 9, for some of our community members, they don't get a chance to ever really participate. And so we should consider for some of our seniors to maybe pick one Saturday for one of our council meetings or 2 in the year to afford them an opportunity to join us as well. So having said that, city staff, city manager, thank you guys so very much. City attorney, thank you. Will, as always, thank you. And to everyone, please be safe and have a great day.
All right, thank you. Bye.
We will now call this session to an end.
So do we need a
At 1:08 p.m.
Thank you, Wilda, Alyssa.
Thank you.